Okay, good afternoon, everybody. That sounds unusual given that we normally have our meetings in the morning, but good afternoon. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, March the 23rd. We're about to begin. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and the first item on the agenda is to call the order and the national anthem. So if we can rise for the national anthem, please. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a public forum, not to exceed 15 minutes. I do not believe we have anybody scheduled for that today. So the next item is council announcements. And I would like to just say on behalf of council, if I may, a warm welcome to our newest member of council, Reka Shepherd, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Shepherd has been a councillor now for about 12 hours. So thank you for doing all the work that you needed to do to be prepared for this meeting, Councillor, and we certainly welcome you to be here. So that said, if you don't mind, I'd just like to make one more announcement, and just to let everybody know, this is our longtime treasurer, David Dexter's last meeting. And I don't see David in the audience, but I'm sure he's listening in virtually. And I know, so many of us on council over the years that I've been on council have worked with David. He's been instrumental and in running the operation financially of this corporation for many, many years. And I know I speak for myself, but I'm sure I speak for others as well, that it's always a pleasure to have worked with him. He's done a spectacularly good job in helping us to manage some very, to juggle the financial affairs that have to be juggled to run a corporation like the City of Richmond Hill. So, David, I wish you the very, very best in retirement, and best of luck and best wishes and best health. And there's the man of the hour right there. David, congratulations on your retirement. You will be sorely missed, sir. Okay, so other council announcements, Councillor Chan and Councillor DePaulo and Councillor Munch. So go ahead, Councillor Chan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to our newest colleague, but for councillor. The mayor already spoke about. I was about to also express, I for one, sincere thanks and gratitude on behalf of myself and as a community represented in Ward 6 for all the years of dedicated service of our treasurer, Mr. David Dexter, for his strong support and expert knowledge and experience in not only dealing with all kinds of financial matters, but in every single year for the last almost 16 years now, for me to look at annual operating budget, capital budgets, and everything relating to money. So thank you, Mr. Dexter. With me, you have a very enjoyable I would say, post-retirement life. And also, I take great pleasure to also wish everyone in the community of Richmond Hill and beyond celebrating the New Year LaRouche, not only among people of Persian heritage, but also in many other places in the world. So happy LaRouche to everyone. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for me to share these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chan. Next person for a council announcement is Councillor DePaulo.
Thank you, Mayor West. And I too would like to extend congratulations to our treasurer, David Dexter. As the budget chair and working with him on 4 budgets for this term of council, it has been an absolute honor. He is an absolute consummate professional. The city is in excellent financial health due to his leadership and his work with his team. The fact that we've froze the tax rate the last 2 years, but still contributing very healthily to our reserve funds and improving our services, and all that work done by the Financial Services Division has been excellent under David Dexter's guidance. I know that he dates back with the city to the early 2000s in various other capacities. He was deputy treasurer up until 2006 when I left, and just an honor and a pleasure to have worked with you, Mr. Dexter, and we wish you all the very best in your retirement.
Thank you, Regional Local Councillor DePaulo. Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It may not be appropriate at this time, but if I can get a seconder, I would like to deny Mr. Dexter's request to retire. If I can get a seconder.
I'm very sad to say, Councillor, that is procedurally out of order, and you're just going to have to go with that on that one.
David, you're very lucky. I told you this when you announced that you were retiring. It's going to be very sad to see you go, sir. You have been a pillar in this establishment, and I think you know how I feel about that. And it's going to be sad to see you go. The residents of Richmond Hill will not be happy. I don't think anybody is yet able to fill your shoes, sir. And I know they're going to give it a shot, but it's going to be tough to fill those shoes, sir. So if you decide to change your mind and you don't like retirement, you always got a home over here. So since I can't get a seconder for my motion, and it's not procedurally correct, I wish you the best in your retirement, sir. And secondly, I want to welcome Ms. Shepherd, Councillor Shepherd, to council. We're now back to the full strength of 9, and I think we're going to get a lot of things done now. You know, the democracy index, now we just went up about, how far did we go up, Tom, up the ladder? We've got a woman, we've got somewhat a minority person, the first Persian person on Richmond Hill Council, am I correct? And we're very lucky to have her. And our Persian staff is very pleased that we have someone on council, and this is awesome. And so I think on the democracy index, we went from last to probably middle of the field. Now, if one of you wants to resign, we can get somebody else and try and get us up the ladder. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person on the list is Councillor Munch.
Good day. I guess I'll too. David, I wish you all the best for your next chapter in your life. And, I wish you great health and happiness for you and your family. Hope you continue to be the person you are, great spirit, really from the ground up. And, I wish nothing but the best for you, sir. And I hope you really have fun and enjoy your family time. Job well done. On another note, I want to thank all the candidates who came forward. Yesterday was a long day for council, but it was even a longer day for those candidates. It was really tough to do what we did, and it was really interesting how it all played out. But I want to thank all the candidates who put forward. I want to thank the engagement that we had. It's very open. I thought it was a great experience. My first time ever going through that appointment type, and really a lot of really great engagement. And obviously, congratulations to the victor, who's got similar glasses to me. So obviously, it's a style issue. So I want to wish you well and all the best. I want to thank all the council for what they did yesterday. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Silovitz, and I think I saw a hand from Mr. Dexter too. So we'll go to Councillor Silovitz first. I should mention, if I might, Councillor Silovitz and Councillor Liu are both with us today. They're with us virtually. So go ahead, Councillor Silovitz.
Thank you, Mayor West. Hello, everybody. Just from my end, also to our departing treasurer, David Dexter, whom we call Dex, and he's definitely Dex. I want to, from my end, personally, as well as on behalf of the Ward 5 residents, I want to thank you for your years of service. I've known you for a long time, and before I was a councillor as well, and you are the epitome of professionalism. And I would venture to say, on a personal level, you're a friend. And you are perhaps one of the sweetest, kindest, gentlest gentlemen I have ever known. And I want to thank you for that, because it's really needed sometimes in today's world. So Dex, I will wish you all the best. And sorry, I can't be there. I would hug you if I could, but it's virtual. And I wish you all the best in all your future endeavors and enjoy your retirement, because I'm sure that it's very, very needed. Thank you so much, Dex. And also from the other woman on council to our new councillor, Reka Shepherd. Welcome, madam. It's a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you, Mayor West.
Thank you, Councillor Silovitz. And Mr. Dexter, I think you might want to weigh in with a few words here.
I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to all the councilors and all the very kind words. They mean a lot. 25 years with one organization and 25 years, one organization in public service is truly a blessing and a privilege for me. It's been a great career with Richmond Hill. I've enjoyed serving this council and all the councils. It's been an honor and a privilege, and it's been an honor and privilege to serve the residents of this great community as well. Thank you, everybody. And I hope one day we get to do the age-old tradition of shaking hands and giving a hug somewhere down the line. But for now, it'll be there. So when I come visiting, being on a fixed income, I'll look for someone to buy my lunch. Thank you.
Fair enough. The words from the treasurer. Thank you, sir. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is introduction of emergency or time-sensitive matters. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, the next item is adoption of the agenda. So we have, okay, we've got 3 sets of council minutes, 1 public hearing, 15 agenda items, and 1 presentation, as well as 7 delegations and 2 other business items, as well as a couple of bylaws and also 1 closed session item. So I need a motion to adopt. Councillor Pirelli, second. Councillor Shepherd. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Number 6, disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk. The number 7, adoption of previous council minutes. We've got 3 sets, and we could probably adopt those as one. A motion to adopt those, Councillor Chan, seconded by Councillor DiPaolo. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so identification of items requiring separate discussion. So we got 13, 1, 3, 9, 10, 11 and 12, 14, 1 and 14, 2. Are highlighted on our sheet. Councillor Liu.
13.2, please.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No, not 13.2. Okay, seeing none. So the ones that we could adopt on consent then would be 13.4, 13.5, 13.6, 13.7, 13.8, 6. Can we do the bylaws? No.
No, I would not at this time, Mr. Mayor, but you can adopt 13.9, 11, and 12. They're merely correspondence.
Okay, yep, that's
So
fine.
just for receipt, so.
All right, so I need a motion to move the rest, to adopt the rest of the items. Councillor Pirelli, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. All those in favor? Okay, that passes, that carries. All right, so, oh, sorry, adoption of the remainder of, yeah, so we just did that. My apologies. Okay, public hearings. So we have agenda item 10.1. I don't see anybody in the audience that looks like they're wanting to speak about this.
Thank you. And just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, no one has registered to speak to this item as well. So it would appear to be in order to adopt the staff recommendations.
Okay, nobody in the live audience? No, okay. All right, so can I have a motion then to adopt 10.1 then and the recommendations in that staff report? Councillor DiPaolo, Councillor Shepherd, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries. All right, so the next item is presentation by Patrick Lee, Director of Policy Planning, and Sybil Von Kersel, Manager of Policy Planning, regarding the Region of York's draft official plan. This is a 15-minute presentation, and I think Mr. Lee will be joining us virtually. Go ahead, Mr. Lee, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of council. If we could get the presentation up on the screen, that would be great. Thank you very much. This afternoon's presentation is about the draft new Region of York official plan. It's a plan that the regional staff and regional council have been working on for the last couple of years. And Richmond Hill staff and at the political level, we've had input into that process, but they've got a complete draft out in front of us now. And I want to give a little presentation overview of that plan with a bit of an emphasis on matters that relate directly to Richmond Hill. If we could go to the next slide. So by and large, the regional plan and the aspirations of Richmond Hill Council and staff and the emerging new Richmond Hill official plan, which is really sort of an update to our 2010 plan, are very much aligned. There is very little to sort of quibble about between the two plans, very much aligned. We do have two specific recommendations that we at the staff level would like to present to council through the report and the presentation that would align the new regions plan a little better with Richmond Hill's directions and aspirations. And I'll get to those specific two recommendations in a couple of minutes. Next slide, please. So the purpose of any regional official plan is to essentially implement provincial policy across the region. Generally, it's a high-level planning document to guide anticipated growth, and it's to cover growth up to the year 2051 in this particular instance. The region has an extensive role as a provider of major infrastructure, water pipes, sewer pipes. It's also the housing service manager. That relates to the provision of social housing and affordable housing. And generally, the region's official plan is to ensure that growth is sustainable. And to that regard, and you'll see in a couple of slides coming up that sustainable growth is all about being efficient, and to a great degree, the focus of the region's plan is to intensify, to sort of build new housing and businesses as much as possible within the built area of a municipality. And that way you're not having to extend expensive sewer and water pipes into unserviced areas at a considerable cost to both the region and the local municipality. Next slide, please. So the general vision of the ROP 2051 is to create strong, caring, and safe communities. And they've got a number of guiding principles that are informed by a bunch of sub-studies around housing and transportation and servicing and, fairly typical modern planning paradigm directions, deal with growth in a sustainable way, develop complete communities, deal with climate change, protect employment lands. They're taking a people and transit first approach. So all very sort of solid tenets to build an official plan around, and similar tenets that our official plan update is taking. So once again, very good alignment between us and the region. Next slide, please. So in dealing with future anticipated growth, the slide on the screen here shows the individual municipal anticipated growth as well as that of the region. And overall, the region, you can see the population's at about 1.22 million, anticipated to grow to just over 2 million persons by the year 2051. And then when it comes to employment, going from 640,000 to 990,000 jobs roughly come the year 2051. So in terms of Richmond Hill, the region anticipates that we will grow from a current population of approximately 213,000 to 319,600 come 2051, and our job growth will go from 86,000 to 122,000 and change in 2051. I think there will be a number of us that have seen the recent census statistics come out with respect to growth, and somewhat surprising has been that the rate of growth in the GTA has been somewhat less than it has been in the previous couple of censuses. And when it comes to sort of predicting population growth, a lot of things go into the mix at both the macro and micro level, and little changes in society can make big differences in terms of population growth. So what we've seen recently over the last 5-year census period in Richmond Hill, we've experienced a growth rate of 3.6%. That's a bit less than the last census. The city of Markham grew at just 2.9%. The city of Toronto grew at 2.3%. And miraculously, somehow, the city of Mississauga actually shrank by 0.5%. And they're still trying to figure that one out. But suffice to say that growth in the GTA has been, much slower than it's been. We're still growing, but just a little slower. There are some places, around the province where, growth has exceeded the last census. The city of Hamilton, for example, grew by 6%, which is more robust than it had in the past. And there are a number of municipalities to the north of us in Simcoe County where they've actually grown at a rate of 20% over the last census. And there's a number of reasons for this, and many of them are not surprising. During COVID, there's been reduced international immigration. Given the general demographics of the GTA and Ontario in particular, we've had a lot of people of retirement age, not just Mr. Dexter, but a whole lot of others. And a lot of those people have moved outside of the GTA to take advantage of amenity locations, some further north in the Barrie and Simcoe County area. As we're all aware, housing has become increasingly expensive in the GTA, and many people have sought out housing that's more affordable outside of the GTA. And then with COVID, by virtue of the way that many of us are in this meeting in a virtual world, we've all realized that we can, in many instances, work remotely, virtually, and that's allowed people to move again out to the hinterland. So not surprising, given what's gone on in society, that the growth rates have been somewhat less than they were in the previous census. Nonetheless, all of that can turn itself around, and we do have to realize that what's made the GTA and York Region and Richmond Hill attractive for growth, those reasons will come back, and they'll continue to be important reasons why people will want to move here, and we do have to anticipate growth. In terms of how much we grow, a lot of it these days relates to the amenities that a particular area has to offer. And, we heard from our consultant, David Dixon, who's been integral to the development of our OP update, that the best functioning and amenity-laden communities are the ones that are going to succeed in attracting and retaining new residents and new businesses. So the more complete communities that we have that have that mix of uses and bike paths and sidewalks and great parks and open spaces and great transit, they'll be the ones that will actually attract the growth. So in the end, it's not so much about how much we grow to show how successfully we are. It's about how well we grow. And if we grow really well, we will grow more. So the emphasis is not so much on quantity, it's on quality. Next slide, please. Well, getting back more to the region's plan itself, they are directing the majority of growth to the built-up areas. And the province defined the built-up areas when they did the first growth plan back in 2006. And essentially anything that was built on the ground as of 2006 is defined as the built-up area. So in terms of a policy direction to see intensification, the region is requiring that a minimum of 50% of new development be accommodated within that built-up area that was defined by the province back in 2006. And once we get to 2041, that percentage goes up to 55%. So by virtue of the sort of urban condition of the three southerly municipalities, which includes Richmond Hill, much of the intensification is directed to Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and Markham. And in terms of how we've been doing in terms of meeting this policy, Richmond Hill over the past 10 years has been averaging a 64% intensification rate, and that's sort of one of the best percentages in the region. So we're doing an excellent job, and the region and our updated OP directs us to continue to grow through intensification. Next slide, please. So the region, in understanding the anticipated growth pressures, does realize that there will be a need for some new communities. Not all of the growth moving forward will be able to be accommodated within that sort of 2006 built-up area. What you see here on the screen are the municipalities where new community areas are proposed. And one of the requirements to develop a new community outside of the existing urban boundaries is that you need to have what's known as white belt lands. And those are lands that are currently classified as rural, but are not within the green belt, and hence they're called white belt. So to accommodate the anticipated growth, we see East Gwillimbury, King, Markham, Vaughan, and Whitchurch Stouffville get a certain number of hectares of land for new community areas for residential, and then a certain amount of lands for employment growth. If we can go to the next slide, please. So When it comes to new communities, Richmond Hill staff and regional staff and Richmond Hill Council have indeed sort of pondered the possibility of new communities. And unlike the municipalities that we saw on the previous screen, Richmond Hill doesn't have any white belt lands to expand into. Richmond Hill's built area and urban boundary is hard up against the green belt. So in looking for opportunities for new communities, the region and the city concluded that we actually don't need any new communities or white belt lands that will become into the urban boundary, simply because we have the ability to deal with population growth within our intensification areas, within our built boundaries. And on that basis, the region did not propose any kind of urban boundary expansion for Richmond Hill. But moreover, the largest reason is that the province has been pretty clear that they're not going to allow new communities to occur in the green belt. And therefore, there's no sort of ability for Richmond Hill to create a new community in a white belt lands, because we have no white belt. We're right up against the green belt. Council considered this situation on two different occasions. One was back in June of 2021, when staff presented a report on the key direction for the region's OP, and realized that, okay, if we're in that position, I guess there's nothing we can do about it. And our council, did not direct the region at that point to do anything different. More recently, when the staff report came forward on Richmond Hill's key directions report in February last month, once again, it was explained that we don't have an opportunity for a new community, and council recognized that and did not direct the region to do anything different. So there was indeed consideration for new communities in Richmond Hill, but we all realize that's not possible. Next slide, please. So how the region is going to handle growth, by and large, it's through a centers and corridors approach. And in particular, there's a hierarchy, and it starts with regional centers, such as our regional center at Yonge and Highway 7. Then there's major transit station areas at subway stations, and then it goes down to major transit station areas that are along sort of bus rapid transit routes. Then there's regional corridors, and then at the lowest level, local centers and corridors. And as much as the region will prescribe minimum jobs and persons per hectare in
Point of order.
many of these areas, it's the local municipality
Mr. Lee,
that gets to
sorry
detail.
to interrupt. Mr. Lee, hold on a sec. Regional Local Council, point of order.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I noticed that the time expired about a minute and a half, but you haven't mentioned it.
I was waiting for Mr. Lee. How much more have you got in your presentation?
I can wrap up in 2 minutes.
Okay, well, I'd like to hear the rest of the presentation. I think it's fairly important that we get all the information we need before we consider this report.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, when you want to hear all of the information, the procedural bylaw doesn't apply. Is that correct?
Well, I would suggest that it
I'm
would be in
asking you a
council's.
question.
No, I think that I would suggest in this case that it's important for us to hear
In this case,
the rest of
yes.
the rest of this presentation, because this is a crucial thing that we're going to be dealing with on this council.
Well, I would respectfully suggest, Mr. Chairman, that everybody's important here and we should hear all of their commentary.
Okay.
And I hope you keep that in mind the next time someone who's giving a deputation wants to go a little bit over the
Mr.
time
Lee,
limit.
if you want to continue, that would be great. Thank you.
Great point of information.
We need to wrap that up quickly, Mr. Lee. Yes, Councillor Munch.
There's lots of information here I haven't seen some of this information before. Has this been available to the public or other members of council before today?
I would assume that this is information that is in the staff report that we've had available to us.
Is that, I haven't seen this. Have you seen? I have not seen any of this information. So
None of this is not, so to deal with your point of information, none of this information to me is things that I haven't seen in a staff report in some form or another, but
please point that out to me because I can't seem to find it. So if you're
well,
aware,
can I actually, Councillor Munch, if I could ask, we'll finish this up and then we could ask the
Again, so
Director
if
of Policy Planning that.
you're saying this is available, I'm saying that has any other member of council, because
Well,
I'm seeing,
What I'm saying is we could ask the Director of Policy Planning that.
shouldn't the public,
It's not available, but
so public shouldn't have opportunity?
Just a minute. I was hoping to wait so we can get through this presentation. Mr. Lee, can you answer that question, please? And then
Yes,
wrap it up.
Through the mayor, by and large, this presentation is stuff that's in the report. The slides might not be exact. There's a lot of words in the report, and we're trying to use slides in a PowerPoint presentation to explain what's in the report.
Okay, so if this is a point of information, sir, the mayor just said that this was available and it was in the report. Now I heard you, sir, say that this is an excerpt of a presentation that you've made. Is this presentation available to the public, or is this just showing us today? Because how is a public or members of council supposed to engage when we don't have this information?
Okay. Councillor Munch, the clerk has his hand up. Mr. Hike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In accordance with practice, if a presentation is available prior to the meeting, it is actually distributed electronically to members of council. I can confirm that this presentation was distributed electronically yesterday to members of council. In accordance with practice, if it is not available prior to the meeting or in sufficient time, we do have the presentation here and would then append it to the agenda following the meeting for public consumption.
Okay, so thank you. So Mr. Mayor, obviously we had a meeting yesterday, weren't aware of it. It's okay. I thank the clerk for putting it forward because I didn't see it. Obviously you didn't see it because it was brought in yesterday. And I'm going to try and search for it. It would have been polite for us all to explain that because it's important that information is open and transparent in a public process.
Okay, Councillor Munch, I understand your take on this, but I think right now we'd like to get through the rest of this presentation. Mr. Lee said he would wrap this up quickly, and then we'll move on to bring it back to council. Mr. Lee, go ahead.
Thank you. If we can go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's two sort of major recommendations that staff are proposing to council as a request to the region. And the first one, the region is planning new GO stations, and some of that planning is indeed independent of Metrolinx. But one of the GO stations they're proposing is at Bayview and 19th Avenue. And as we're all aware, GO stations need to be where there's either existing or future population growth. And Richmond Hill staff feel that it would be better to have a new GO station further south at Elgin Mills and Newkirk along the rail line, because that's in close proximity to the Young Bernard KDA that was recently approved by the OLT, and we'll see considerable population growth in that area, and they would have close access to the GO station if it was at Elgin Mills and Newkirk. When you're further north, where the region's showing the GO station at Bayview and 19th, you are dealing with areas that are not developable because of the Greenbelt and the RMCP. So we're not going to see as much growth up there. Better to have the GO station where the growth is. Next slide, please. So the region is focusing on attempting to build complete communities. Much of the sort of typical things you need in a complete community, mix and range of uses, protect for employment areas, protect agricultural systems, general good planning things to provide for, efficient and orderly growth. Next slide, please. The plan also looks closely at affordable housing, and there's a direction to see rental housing built, a target 4,000 units in Richmond Hill, and 30,000 overall by 2051. The plan is asking local municipalities to prohibit the conversion and demolition of existing rental housing. We don't see too much of that happening yet, but it happens quite a bit in Toronto, where a purpose-built rental building will get bought up by a developer and converted into expensive condominiums. Targets for affordable housing, 35% in the regional centers and MTSAs, 25% outside of them. That's a policy that's in the existing ROP, carried through into the new one. And then to diversify housing stock by providing gentle density and missing middle housing. Next slide, please. So we'll get to the second big recommendation, and that one deals with affordable housing, and it relates to centers where there's a requirement for 35% affordable housing. And the region is looking at 35% in an area over time. But it's not that each individual application would have to provide that 35% affordable housing. City staff are recommending that if you're ever going to get to that 35% within an area, it's really best to require each and every development to provide the 35%, because if you let the first developer off the hook for the 35%, and maybe even the second developer off the hook, well, you got to get the third guy and ask him to do about 60% affordable housing, and that's just not fair. It's just better where we will achieve our goal if we ask the request of everyone, rather than just hoping that we get to 35% kind of at the end of the day. So that's our second big recommendation, just more specificity and not really a change in direction. Next slide, please. In terms of mapping, the region's plan, maps out land use designations at a very high level, just really sort of urban and rural and hamlet. It identifies the provincial plan designations, the RMCP and the green belt. It has a broader regional greenland system, and it does identify some mineral aggregate resource areas through the region. Next slide, please. Climate change is a very important consideration for us all these days, and the region's plan is directing the local municipalities to consider climate change in their policies, looking at both mitigation and adaptation. Richmond Hill has a community energy and emissions plan, as well as a well-developed environment strategy. And once again, we're very much in line with the region, hoping for a net zero target by 2051. Next slide, please.
Okay, Mr. Lee, you must be fairly close to being finished.
Last slide.
All right.
So next steps for the region. June is when the region is going to have their plan in front of their council for adoption. March 31st is when they want to hear comments from the local municipalities, hence the presentation and the report in front of council today. And very last slide is the next one. And the conclusion, really is that the report be considered by council, and we've got two sort of major recommendations, and we ask that they be forwarded on to the region. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lee. So at this time, then we will bring forward, which number? Sorry, it's 13.3. I need somebody to move move a motion, recommendations of the staff report. Councillor Munch, you're going to do that?
I'll move the report forward. I have lots of questions though.
No, that's fine. I just want, before we do that, I just want to make sure we have a seconder. Okay, Councillor Chan. Okay, so go ahead, Councillor Munch.
Okay, thank you. So on slide number 5, we talk about population employment forecast by the local municipality. Where are these numbers? What's the source of this information?
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, the source of this information comes from the region of York. And to get to these numbers, there was a considerable analysis done by the region's consultant, and they looked at things like immigration levels, interprovincial migration, the ability to accommodate growth in York region. I looked at transportation and the ability to expand transportation, and came up with the figures that they did. As I mentioned, trying to anticipate population growth is a tricky thing. This was their sort of best estimate that they can do to predict population over the next 30 years.
So how current is this slide 5?
Well, these are the numbers that are in the draft regional official plan.
So these are the most current numbers, is that fair to say?
That's correct.
So the region has 2,034,900, and the last report had 2,020,000. So there's actually an increase in the numbers from York Region from what their last report was done to council. Is that fair?
Yes, I think there have been some small refinements done recently. That's correct.
And the latest census numbers aren't reflected in these numbers. So York Region doesn't use census then?
Well, the census, looks backwards at the last 5 years. How much did we grow or not grow? When you're dealing with projections, you're looking into the future, and 30 years is the time frame for this.
The latest census that was provided by our Commissioner of Planning in the Policy Department less than a month ago said that on May 2021, there was 202,000 in Richmond Hill. Today's report says there's 213,000. Does that mean that we went from 202,000 in May to 213,700 by December?
No, that's not correct. So you're quite right about the numbers in the census. Now, the census still has an undercount in it, and these particular numbers that you saw on the screen and are in the regional official plan, they were put together before the census, but the census undercount has to be performed yet. And generally what happens is the population goes up by some percentage, 2 or 3 percentage points sometime. The undercount hasn't been done yet. So the region's numbers that they have in the ROP, may indeed be correct, but we won't know that exactly until the undercount is done by Stats Canada.
So whose numbers are we supposed to use? City of Richmond Hill numbers, census numbers, regional numbers, because they're all over the map. I'm going to go through the numbers with you in the last 15 years. And when I go through those numbers and I say that Richmond Hill in 2014 said that we had, when I look at 203,211, So our staff said in 2014, in all of our budget going forward, there were 203,000 in 2014. Yet the latest census says we have 202,000. Google says we have 208,000. The region says we have 213,000. I mean, which numbers are we using as a reference document? If we have reference numbers all over the map, which numbers should we be using as a reference document for our role here at the City of Richmond Hill?
Well, there are indeed different numbers because they're generated at different points in time and they're generated in a different fashion. So the census counts people, based on the way the census is done. When the city and the region attempts to identify population, often what's done is it's based on the last census plus the amount of housing that has had building permits issued for it, up to the latest point in time. And you add those two together and you get to a population. But, for planning purposes, the difference between, 213,000 and 204,000, isn't going to reflect, different policy directions. They're close enough. Like if we were out by 50,000 or something, then I think there'd be cause for concern. But when we're talking about 8,000 or 9,000 persons, not a big deal in terms of, policy direction.
If we go into, so a question there, if we go to a negative growth, would policy be reflective in that?
It depends on sort of, what kind of policy we're speaking of. I think our general planning and development policies would remain, by and large, the same. It really would depend on, how much negative it is. We're not seeing negative numbers here. There's an increase from the last census to this census. And what's more important is, what's projected moving forward, because that's what we have to consider when we're planning for infrastructure, both hard and soft, when we're planning for transportation, when we're doing our budgets. We've got to look to the future, not just the past, because the world changes and it changes very quickly.
Do we rely on our consultant like Watson, for example, for any of our policy information going forward?
We rely more on consultants like Watson to sort of deal with growth numbers and anticipated market pressures that will generate growth. We then take those numbers and develop policy accordingly.
So in 2020, our Watson report said we had 207,787. Are we now using the regional numbers, the Watson report numbers? What numbers should we as council use as our reference point for going forward? What is policy planning numbers? What is the number? Because I've got 14 line items for population Richmond Hill on my spreadsheet, 14 different population numbers from our fire department to our policy and planning, to our taxation, to York Region, to census, and the number of variances are dramatic. And if so I want to start there. What reference numbers are we using?
So I think it's important to attempt to use a common number. And my recommendation would be to use the region's numbers, the numbers you saw on the slide, 213,700 persons. I think that's an excellent starting point. That particular number, will have a little bit of a place in history because it's going to be in the regional official plan, and people can look back at that number. Some of the other numbers that you've seen were done for specific purposes at certain points in time. So I think it behooves us to use the numbers that are in the regional official plan.
Okay, because the numbers in the regional plans, when you go through that in the Richmond Hill, so then when we have you mentioned we have negative growth, but yet now when we use the regional numbers, those numbers are higher than the Richmond Hill numbers. So that's our growth statistic. When so the region has more population than what's budgeted from 2020 to 2034, the Richmond Hill number is higher. So where did you get the discussion when you made to council that we're in negative, we had a moderate growth? Where is that?
We certainly did not have any negative growth. The previous census shows us that we grew by 3.6% between 2016 and 2021. My comment was that growth rate was somewhat slower than the 2011 to 2016 period, both for Richmond Hill, the region, and around the GTA.
And we make no adjustment as per your statement earlier. We don't adjust our policy if we're changing our growth rate. We just maintain our high growth concept, even though we don't get the growth.
Well, I guess it's about whether you think it's best to look in the rear view mirror or to look out the windshield of the car as to how you want to drive down the road. Just looking at the last 5 years, yeah, we grew at 3.6%. If it's anticipated that our growth rates will pick up, and that's the understanding we have, better to look at the projections rather than what just happened to have happened in the last 5 years. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think from 2011 to 2016, we grew at about 5.8%. And then from 2016 to 21, it slowed down to 3.6%. We anticipate that it's going to pick up somewhat again as we move forward in time. So build your policy environment on what you think is going to happen in the future as opposed to what just happened in the past 5 years.
So the region has said from 2016 to 2051, they're growing at 1.9%. You're using 3%. So if the region is saying that we're growing at 1.9% and we're anticipating a growth of 3%, and we're requiring a cost to have higher growth, but there's no higher growth. So we're putting investments into the market at a cost for investments that aren't needed because we're not getting the growth. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I disagree with that. So when it comes to building infrastructure, whether it's water pipes or sewer pipes or parks or community centers, we build them only at such time that we know there's a demonstrated demand for them. And if there isn't a demonstrated demand, then we won't build them. So we're not going to build something we don't need, and we're not going to spend money on something we don't need. So, that's where, the 10-year capital forecast and annual budgeting processes, need to have that closer look at, particular supply and demand of whatever it happens to be, whether it's pickleball courts or water pipes or stormwater ponds or whatever it is. We build it when we need it. And if we don't need it, we don't build it.
Do we rebate monies collected if we're charging a certain growth rate, but we don't get that growth rate? Do we rebate that money back to the people who are paying money for growth that never materialized?
Well, the money I think you're speaking of is development charges, and development charges are paid at building permit stage. So in essence, that development charge that a builder pays to us is to cover the growth of that particular unit. So we're not asking developers who are taking out a building permit right now to pay for growth in the future. We're asking them to pay for growth that they're generating right now.
Do we have two types of development charges, local and Richmond Hill wide? Yes or no?
Yes, we do. We have a citywide development charge and an area and a couple of area specific development charges.
So as it relates to housing affordability, if somebody has to pay for a house and pay a development charge, locally and Richmond Hill wide, and Richmond Hill doesn't get the growth, then that homeowner is paying for a charge for future growth, for future investments that they are not responsible for because we never got the growth.
No, that's incorrect. I'm sorry. That when you pay your development charge, you pay it at building permit stage. So let's say it's a detached dwelling. A builder comes in and takes out a permit, applies for a permit for a house, and he has to pay the development charge at that point in time. And that's to cover the growth related costs of that particular house, not a house in the future, but that particular house that he's applied for the permit for. So there's no paying for the future by anyone. You're paying for what you're asking for and building right at the moment.
And what's the definition of a Richmond Hill development charge? Why would somebody pay a development charge to all of Richmond Hill? Why should someone in Ward 3 by Costco buy a house for growth investment into Mill Pond if it's not growing?
Well, that's the difference between area specific development charges and the citywide ones. The area specific ones are pieces of infrastructure that are going to be needed that are only going to service that particular geographic area, and people applying for building permits in that area pay the area specific charge because the city is going to need to build some infrastructure in that particular area. So if you're in a particular area that has an area specific charge, that's what you pay. Then there's a broader citywide charge that everyone pays.
That's the point. If the city isn't growing at the rate that we're anticipating it to grow, but we're charging people as if it is growing, you disagree with that. If the city, if we expect, you just said it yourself, the region says we're growing by 1.9%, but you say we're growing by 3%. That's a pretty significant increase for people who are paying thousands and thousands of dollars. And that affects the housing affordability. Do you not agree? Do you not understand that someone that's paying a fee for a infrastructure, but that infrastructure isn't needed because we didn't get the growth? We don't build pipes that don't need to be built because that's the depreciation cost on that, and the replacement cost has a long-standing challenge for this municipality. So if we are pre-charging and we are not amending our cost, then people are paying more for something that isn't needed. And that affects the competitiveness of our municipality to attract families and housing and where we need to go. We can't just continue to do that. I'll go for a second round because it's only the beginning. Leave it
Okay,
at that.
Councillor
Thank
Munch,
you.
I'll put you down for a
Point of
second
order.
round. Councillor Barros?
Given the importance of this topic and seeing the lenience that you provided staff, I think you should pass on the same level of lenience to councillors who are actually going to make the decisions.
Okay,
I am very much interested in what Councillor Munch
Okay,
has been saying.
I'm not that.
are
I'm
you-
not going to allow that, Councillor Barros.
I
I
didn't
think
even finish
the
speaking.
point about the
You're just going
staff.
to cut me off? Just
I'm
let
ruling
me-
on your point of order,
I haven't finished my point.
but you've made the point of order, and I understand
gonna-
what you're saying. My
Point of
ruling on
order.
that.
Point of order.
Let
Mr.
me-
Chairman, you should allow the member to complete his sentence. Very rude and disrespectful.
Right now,
That's
he
rude and
is.
disrespectful to interrupt him while he's speaking. Let him finish his point of
Councillor
order and
Barros,
then you can rule.
Councillor Barros, finish your point of order quickly so we can move on to the next speaker. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think to be consistent, because the wording you used was, this is very important and I want to hear it. Are you now saying that Councillor Munch's information is
No,
not
no, I'm
important
not.
to you?
No.
And you don't want to hear it?
No, so
That's what
the
it sounds
ruling,
like.
the ruling on your point of order is staff clearly had a presentation that was longer than the time limit that we've allotted. We could have allotted more. I gave them the leniency because the thing is with the staff presentation is that it provides the foundation along with other information that we receive so that it answers some of the questions that we may have in the future. So my ruling is that we will reasonably stick to the time frame as the procedure bylaw outlines. And at this point in time, the next person on the speaking list is
define
Councillor
reasonably?
Chan.
Like
Councillor Chan,
2
go ahead.
minutes? No answer.
Challenge the chair. If the chairman wants to play fast and loose, Councillor Barros, with the rules, then, and he wants to delay this proceedings and doesn't want to
Okay,
hear
that's
from
fine.
members of council.
Councillor Pirelli,
then
that's
we
fine.
will
If you're
then I will
challenging,
contribute.
then that's
I will
fine.
contribute to the
If you-
delay.
if you are con-
and have
if
you
you
stay
are
here
challenging the
longer.
chair, that's
I will
fine.
have you stay here
Mr.
longer,
Clerk,
sir.
challenge of the
We
chair.
know the outcome of the challenge of the chair, Mr. Chairman. You, sir, are wasting everybody's time by doing this.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. If I understand, and please correct me, and I apologize if I'm wrong, the chair has ruled that members of council shall maintain and stick to as close as possible to the 5-minute speaking time in the procedure bylaw. Is that?
That is my ruling.
No, that's not the ruling.
They should stick to it reasonably. And
Reasonably.
I was then in a sub-question
Okay.
wondering, what does he define as
Excuse me, Councillor
reasonably?
Barros,
Is
the challenge of the
reasonably
chair
half the
is that
time
we're
of what's
not
allotted,
waiving,
like
we're
2.5
not
minutes?
waiving the procedural bylaw in this
But you
case.
did.
No, we're not.
You did. It was a 10-minute presentation.
Mr. That is
You-
my
you- you
ruling.
allowed
If there's a
17
challenge of the
minutes.
chair, then we challenge the chair. Go ahead.
I didn't
Mr.
challenge the
Height.
chair. Who challenged the chair?
Mr. Councillor Pirelli,
Point of information.
go ahead.
Can I get a definition of reasonable?
Okay. We are sticking to the procedure bylaw. That is the ruling. Go ahead.
So you're
Mr.
sticking to the
Mr. Height, go
procedural
ahead.
bylaw? So you're sticking to the procedural bylaw? Is that what I heard? That's your ruling?
Thank you.
Is that your ruling? Point of information. Answer the question.
We're trying to move on with the meeting, Councillor
no, you're
Pirelli.
trying
I've
to play
already
fast
given
and
you,
loose
I've
with
already,
the
no,
rules.
we're not playing
You're
fast and
trying
loose
to
with the
play
rules.
fast and loose with the rules.
Mr. Height,
When
go
it
ahead.
suits your needs, you'll do that.
Thank you.
I withdraw the challenge.
Councillor Chan, go ahead. You're seconding. Oh, actually, Councillor Much, just to confirm, you're moving the staff recommendations. Is that correct? Thank you. Councillor Chan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did second the motion because based.
Actually, you know what? I won't remove the report. You're right. I can't move forwards based on the information you give me. I can't move forwards with the recommendation. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor Chan, are you willing to move the staff recommendations?
Yes, I'm moving the staff recommendation.
Okay, before you move on, I need a seconder for the staff recommendations. Regional Local
Understand.
Councillor DePaula. Go ahead, Councillor Chan.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for Director Lee for the presentation. Certainly the numbers, something that I think he did outline. There's a challenge always, to the best information we have in front of us, looking in the future. City already looking at 2041 and the region is 2051. And the recommendation that I am supporting is number one, is that other than, in addition to receiving the report, it's talking about amending in terms of basically shifting where the addition of the new GO station would be. And I think that's something that I could support in terms of the Young and Bernard KDA development and so on. However, I'm also wondering over time whether in fact there may be a need for also Bayview and 19th, but that's not in front of us. So that part I'm comfortable in supporting. And the other part is also talking about that intensification that with the threshold of 35% or even more in the city of Richmond Hill, that's part I can support. So all in all, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure that my colleagues have more to add, and particularly our regional colleagues was more attuned to that. So I need a seconder, I guess, before we can go on to talk more about this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We have a seconder. Councillor DePaula said he would second. Councillor DePaula, do you want to speak?
Yes. I have a question also of Director Lee. Could we put slide number 14 from the presentation back up on the screen? This one, you just skipped over a little quickly, and I wasn't able to view it. Is this an excerpt taken directly from the draft regional official plan?
Yes, it is.
So this is actually in the plan. So we've got just types in terms of land use designations, that entire block is in the regional official plan in the agricultural area circled in map 1A?
That's correct. That's the block that's immediately south of Bethesda and adjacent to Highway 404. And that was reported through our council back in June of last year, that this is what the region was proposing in terms of an agricultural area. Council agreed with that, and the region went ahead, seeing no opposition from our council at that time.
Okay, so why is it circled then? Is it circled by our staff here, or is there a recommendation?
Yeah, it was. Thank you for that. It was indeed circled by our staff, just to sort of show, where the agricultural area in Richmond Hill was.
Is that in anticipation of the member motion later, or is
No,
it
because
part of this
the
recommendation?
Not at all, because the member motion doesn't deal with this concession block that has the red circle around it. That's the concession block to the south.
Okay. Well, okay. So I too support the recommendation that Elgin Mills in Newkirk be a more important place for us to have a GO station if the region is going to push for an additional GO station in Richmond Hill. Yeah, I don't know if Metrolinx has any intentions, after the considerable expense they've put into Bloomington and the Stouffville GO stations, but I think that's important for us to push for. It would line up a lot more with where we're currently directing some intensification. So I support the recommendations. Another question: Our density targets in our official plan update right now is proposed at, is it 35% affordable? Is that what we're trying to achieve across the city?
No, in centers and corridors, like the Young Bernard KDA or Richmond Hill, our Young and 16th, our key development areas, for example. That's where the region's looking for 35%. That's in our current OP. It's proposed in our updated OP. And so what we're saying a little different, we're being a little more aggressive in some ways, or maybe more prescriptive than the region is. The region's saying that over time, say in Young and 16th, we'll have 35%. And what we're saying is, have the policy read that each and every development needs to provide the 35%, because if we give some people a pass, we'll never get to the total of 35%. Or if we try to get
I understand that reasoning. You're saying in centers and corridors, you want to compel every development in centers and corridors, and I think you included MTSAs. So I just think, it's probably unrealistic for our Gormley MTSA to achieve that 35% affordability.
Very true, and it's not in each MTSA. It's in the key development areas is where we need to get the 35%. The rest of the city, it's 25%, and we don't have to ask it of each development across the city because it's too broadly based. But our ask is in our key development areas that we get the 35% from each development, but not each MTSA.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, can you put the two recommendations up from staff or two or three? So Mr. Lee, are you saying then it should be worded that just in the key development areas, we should be requesting that the region require a 35% affordability?
Well, let's get the wording up on the screen. Okay, my apologies. It does include MTSAs. The focus was indeed on the key development areas. So that would mean that the true growth areas, MTSAs, and the centers, such as key development areas, the target would be 35%. And we're saying have it with each development rather than kind of after 20 years, let's hope that we got to 35% and we'll have to add it all up. We'll just get it each time.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have seconded this, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable. So we're specifically directing the region to amend their official plan to require, just within Richmond Hill, I assume, each development application in our MTSAs, every one of our MTSAs. I would be more comfortable if it were worded that each new development application located within our key development areas in Richmond Hill be required to require a minimum of 35% of residential units in each new development application located within the key development areas in Richmond Hill, or even the regional centers. I don't know how broad or specific.
Point of
but
information.
I think it's problematic.
Regional Local Councillor Pirelli, point of information.
Mr. Chairman, it really sounds like the seconder of the motion now wants to change his second. Is he changing? Is he moving an amendment?
Okay, I think he's looking to explore that possibility now that he's understands something differently than he did before. So we'll find that out in a minute, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I've got another couple of minutes to get further clarification is what I'm trying to do. I'm asking Director Lee, are you comfortable with this?
Yeah. Okay. So
the wording.
Thank you for that question. So the region is saying in centers and MTSAs, it should be 35%. And we're agreeing with that, but it's just a slight change that we want it on an application by application basis rather than take 10 years and add it up and see how well we've done or not how well we've done. The question that's been posed is, should it be all MTSAs? Should the region change it to just say certain MTSAs rather than all of them?
Yeah, point of information.
Okay. Well,
Hold on a sec. Councillor Munch, go ahead. Point of information.
I was going to chime in just before he reached in there, and there's an example. And when I asked my question going earlier about where we're getting our numbers from, region, what have you, here we have a motion on the floor.
Okay, Councillor Munch.
You have to let me finish before you
a
can
point of
interrupt.
information is
Point of
a question.
Point of order.
Go ahead. What's your question? Point of order from Councillor Barros. Sorry, Councillor Munch.
Point of order.
Councillor Barros.
As defined in the procedural bylaw, a point of information is to gain information on the motion that is on the floor. Doesn't appear that
That's what
speaker is gaining information on the motion,
Oh, there is.
but is seeking clarification on comments he made
that is
earlier. Which, Mr.
I
Mayor,
agree.
had you allowed him to continue, we might not be in this predicament we find ourselves in right now.
Thank you. Councillor Munch, this needs to be a piece of information that you're looking
That's
for on
exactly.
the motion.
So
Okay,
please
so
let me finish.
if not
Let me
on the
finish.
comments, so what I would suggest
So
is
let
if you
me
wanted to ask
finish.
that question, go ahead.
So if you wouldn't interrupt and listen, it would be fantastic. So here in the motion under B2, it talks about, as the deputy mayor is talking about an MTSA, about the affordable, the region says we're in a housing crisis, but we in Richmond Hill did not endorse that we are in a housing crisis. We don't know what an MTSA is, at least I don't, because I would like to hear from the policy director who just said, we're not really sure, is it all MTSAs or is it Target, what have you? How can we be moving forward? Why are we even here as a city if the region's going to say to Richmond Hill, on behalf of the region, we are going to require Richmond Hill to do
Okay,
their
Councillor
thing?
Munch, that's fine. Director Lee, if you have an answer to that, and then we'll go back to Councillor DiPaolo.
Thank you. So the region, it's on the screen. All MTSAs are to have 35% of the units to be affordable. That's the policy now. If council doesn't feel that's an appropriate policy, council can send a different message to the region. Staff don't have a problem with what the region's proposing, other than we think the language should be a little bit more prescriptive to require each development to provide the 35% rather than
information.
adding it up after a few years.
Thank you, Director Lee. Councillor Pirelli, point of information.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Lee, I understand that we have a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendations, which may or not be what the staff are recommending. But in order for me to make an informed decision, could you please give me the definition of affordable? And can we put it on the screen so that we know exactly what we're talking about?
The definition of affordable is that the residents in the municipality at the 60th percentile of income don't spend more than, I believe it's either 30 or 33% of their income on housing costs.
Okay, thank you. Regional Local Councillor.
Point of information is not complete yet. Can we put that on the screen, and can we please have what that number is? And more importantly, I'd like to know what the cost of that unit would have to be so that we know what they're building and what you're going to get for that affordability. In other words, I'm trying to ascertain, does that come out to $1,000 a month on a mortgage? Does that come out to a purchase price of $300,000?
Okay,
Or is it
Councillor
a purchase
Pirelli.
Point of order,
price
Mr. Mayor.
of
Point of order from
$300,000?
Regional Local Councillor DiPaolo.
I don't see how these are points of information.
No.
The legitimate questions that can be asked when it's the turn of the member.
I agree. So I would like, at this point in time, Mr. Lee, if you have some additional information, that's fine. Regional Local Councillor DiPaolo, you have the floor. Finish up. I think you have however much time you have left. Go ahead.
Okay. Questions can be asked by others later. I understand there's a very mathematical formula that the region has for affordability, and what's affordable in Richmond Hill will be a higher price than what's affordable elsewhere. In other parts of the region, it's directly related to our city's average income. So I understand the objective of the region is in general to force us to have 35% affordability within their terms, the regional center and the MTSAs. But if we're going to be this specific and ask that each new development application in all of our MTSAs conform on their own, regardless of which MTSA we're talking about, because we have some sparse. We have an MTSA that's 50 houses, 50 people and jobs per hectare, and the majority across the region are 200. It's not going to work, and if we make a request for an amendment to the regional official plan and then it's implemented, we are going to have to comply, and we're not able to. So I can't support B number 2 because of that. I'll have to withdraw my second of Councillor Chan's motion at this time. I'd happily friendly amend it, but I don't think that's working for other members of council.
Okay, your time is up.
Yep.
So, Councillor Pirelli, you are the next person on the speaking list. Go ahead.
We don't have a motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Are you willing to second the motion?
No.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Silovitz, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I totally understand Regional Councillor and Deputy Mayor DiPaolo's concerns. And as a regional councillor, they are completely valid. So I know that the discussion will continue on that level, but I'm quite happy to second that. I just have one question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Lee. If you could just help me understand something, because this is the region's official plan. We're working on ours, City Plan 2041. So, and there's a motion coming up later about Young and 16th. Could you help me understand, please? If your presentation says, and we all know this, that there is no more developable land on the earth in Richmond Hill, then the only developable land we have is in the sky. So what mechanism is in place in York Region's official plan, and I hope coming to ours, that will help put a limit on story heights and densities, because otherwise it's just open season. If the only, do you know what I'm saying? If the only developable land is the air, then, and sometimes only the 45-degree angular plane is used, it's not even used in stories anymore. How do we control this? Because it's all appealable. Everything's appealable in these documents, and it can just go to the OLT. Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor Silovitz. So Richmond Hill as a local municipality has the ability to control its heights and densities everywhere, in its MTSAs, in its corridors, in its key development areas. And we have plenty of ability to grow to our anticipated levels by allocating densities that are sensitive to the immediate context. We don't have to, develop massively tall towers in order to accommodate the anticipated growth. It can be spread out according to the context of the area. Some areas can deal with higher buildings than others and will allow taller buildings in those areas. And then there's other areas where, it's only appropriate for less tall buildings, and that's what we'll permit. But at the end of the day, we still have plenty of bandwidth to accommodate our anticipated growth without overloading a particular area.
Thank you, Director Lee. I appreciate that. And I do appreciate our bandwidth as well. However, through you, Mr. Mayor, once again to Director Lee, I am correct in stating that this document, as is, and our official plan, the new one, are appealable documents to the OLT. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
through the chair to Councillor Silovitz. Yes, indeed, they are appealable to the OLT. Now, there are some restrictions around protected MTSAs that once the local municipality sets a height and density and it's approved, it's not appealable. So we have a little more assurance through newer provincial legislation that we've had in the past.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure about that. But yes, I'll gladly second this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. So Regional Local Councillor Pirelli, you're next.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. This is awesome. First question, Director Lee, did you just say that once we establish heights and densities in an area, it's not appealable?
Within protected MTSAs, that's correct.
What's a protected MTSA? And can you cite one example for me, please?
So as an example, the MTSAs are areas around our transit stations, such as a bus rapid transit area, and the regions identified those. And so once the densities are set in those, then my understanding is they're not appealable.
Have they been set anywhere in Richmond Hill yet?
No, we haven't set them yet. That's part of our sort of next phase of our official plan development to identify what appropriate densities there would be.
So when we go, Director, when we go to set those heights, at that time, will it be appealable? Or what's not appealable, the city's resolution or the region's resolution?
Well, so the region doesn't set our heights and densities. It'll be Richmond Hill City Council that does that. And so we will set, a height and density limit for a particular MTSA. And my understanding is that the initial height and density is appealable, but then once the OLT decides on that, somebody can't come in with a higher height and density. And I'd like to just ask our manager of policy, Ms. Sibel von Kersel, to chime in on this. She's got a little bit deeper understanding than I on this particular point.
Just 1 second before Ms. Sibel chimes in. Did I understand you correctly? You just said that our decision of heights in an MTSA is not appealable, but now you just said that it's not appealable after the OLT, which is the appeal body, makes a ruling? I'm confused. Pardon my confusion.
Yeah, so I think that Ms. von Kersel can explain it a little bit better than I can.
Sure, through the chair. The region's official plan, once adopted by regional council, goes to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. And the minister makes the decision, and the minister's decision is not subject to appeal. So everything in the regional official plan is not subject to appeal. And in the region's official plan, they are proposing what's called Appendix 2, which identifies all of the MTSAs and provides a boundary for them, as well as a minimum density target for them. Some of these MTSAs, the vast majority of them, are identified as protected MTSAs. So when we do our conformity to the region's official plan, wherever the region has identified the MTSA to be protected, and in the case of Richmond Hill, it's all but the Gormley MTSA that is identified right now as being protected. When we provide policies which would include the minimum density and could also include maximum density as well as maximum height, those policies in our official plan will not be subject to appeal. So I think that answers your questions.
Not exactly. I apologize.
No worries.
So the region's official plan, which approved by the minister, you stated, would not be appealable. But,
Yes.
but Director Lee told us that the region doesn't pick the heights, which you confirmed.
Yes.
So you're saying that once we determine the heights in these MTSAs, they are no longer appealable to OLT?
Yes. So the Planning Act states that the permissions and the maximum heights and densities are not subject to appeal.
The what, sorry? I missed one of the words. The permissions?
Yes, like land use permissions. Those
Okay.
are not subject to appeal. Minimum and maximum densities and heights are not subject to appeal. A private application may come in the future where the applicant seeks an increase in height or density. And in those situations, council has the authority to either accept the application or refuse or not make a decision on the application. In the case that you refuse or not make a decision on that application, those decisions are also not subject to appeal.
In the MTSA that are protected?
In the MTSAs that are protected, yes. So this is really what happens is we have a little bit more certainty. Development industry has more certainty in terms of what is permitted, and the residents have more certainty in terms of what's permitted, and council has more authority to make the decisions they think are most appropriate for that particular area. So it's leveling playing field for everyone.
Thank you so much for that explanation. It adds a lot of clarity. My second part to that question is, if it's not appealable to the OLT, is it appealable to a court of law?
That's outside my jurisdiction to answer.
To the minister? Right. You could appeal that? Councillor Munch has given me the answer, and I trust that he's accurate. Thank you. Back to Director Lee. Director Lee, it's been over my tenure on council, we always run into people claiming that the official plan states that this is the maximum heights and density, and we should stick to the official plan. And if we don't, we're doing something nefarious. We're in the pockets of developers. And so I would like to avoid that moving forward. In other words, to me, an official plan is just that, a plan. It's a wide, a broad, all-encompassing plan, and it's a plan. It's not carved in stone, but some people in the community would like to believe it is and speak to it as if it is. I would like to avoid that in our next official plan. When would be the most appropriate time for us to go property by property outside of, well, including the MTSAs for that matter? When would be the appropriate time? Would it be now during our comments to the region, or would it be later when we are about to approve our official plan? Because I'd like to go lot by lot and see what the highest and best use for that property is, because I don't want to have to keep defending the rights of applicants to seek what's appropriate for their piece of land. Because if that's the truth, that we should stick to the official plan without exceptions, I'm fairly confident to say that the residents of Richmond Hill don't need to pay members of council to be here. You set the official plan every 10 years, you get a bunch of councillors to come in and set the new official plan for the next 10 years, and see you in 10 years. So when would be the most appropriate time to do that, Mr. Lee?
Through the chair to Councillor Pirelli, the next two batches of official plan amendments that are coming more fall and spring of 2023 are going to be the amendments that identify the heights and densities in all of the growth areas. The batch that's coming in June is just sort of on urban structure and neighborhoods, doesn't get into the question of heights and densities. But the next batch that comes, late in 2022 or early 2023, that's when we're getting into all of the details on height and density. And we'd welcome council and the public's and the development industry's input on what the appropriate heights and densities should be on every property at that point in time.
Director, when we spoke about the Young Bernard KDA, I think we decided that we were going to forego arbitrary heights and densities. And I thought that was a wonderful idea because we would only rely on the other planning principles, setbacks, separation of buildings, angular plane shadowing, studies, wind, all of the other things, transportation, traffic, and forego the arbitrary heights and densities. And that's why I would really like to get this official plan, to make sure that the public, as well as the development industry, understands their rights and responsibilities. So
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pirelli. I don't have anybody else Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Barros, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I myself have a problem with 35% residential units, not knowing what affordable really is. My quick math director says that the median income in Richmond Hill is 88,353, and that the actual CMHC definition of affordability is 30%, not 33%. So again, to Councillor Munch's questioning on what numbers do we use, I don't know. The city of Richmond Hill says 33, CMHC says 30%. I'm going to go with 30%. So that leaves like $2,200.83 a month for a resident to spend on housing. So if they're renting, it has to include heat, hydro, water, and of course taxes and all that kind of stuff. If they're buying a condo, it has to include their condo maintenance fees. I don't know, does this number include the fact that maybe they've already saved up for the last 15, 20 years for a down payment? Or does this number have to be all encompassing in being able to acquire said unit? I don't think, knowing the cost of land in Richmond Hill, knowing the regulatory red tape in actually getting to a building permit in Richmond Hill in the Greater Toronto Area, I don't think this dream of affordable is ever going to be seen. Now, if you're talking about subsidized housing where the government, and who is the government? It's the people that pay taxes. If all of the neighbors in Richmond Hill are getting their money together to invite people from other communities to come to Richmond Hill and to live in subsidized housing, that is a completely different discussion. In fact, that's a discussion to be had at the Region of York. It's not the mandate of this local council to be deciding if we're going to subsidize people. So I have a real problem with that. I don't see how that induces people to actually build product in Richmond Hill. What I do also just want to say as a point, I noticed that in the MTSAs, there's only really one MTSA, and I'm looking at, it was MTSA 48. If I have the correct one there, MTSA 48, which is kind of in or around sort of close to the Oak Ridges community. A bit of it falls onto the other side of Stouffville Side Road. And I bring it up because it is the only MTSA in the Oak Ridges area, hanging on the fringe, the majority of it in Ward 3. I say that because I want to assure the residents in Oak Ridges, there is no one here on this council advocating for an MTSA at Yonge and Bloomington. We do not want one there. We don't want to see buildings that should be built at Yonge and Highway 7 in the Oak Ridges corridor. I have fought for that in the past. I will continue to fight for that in the future. This plan here demonstrates that we are not asking for it, and I will continue to fight for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Hold on a sec. Is there anybody else on the first round? I don't. No, you spoke, you didn't, you're on the second round. No, you spoke on the first round. Councillor, you spoke for 5 minutes. No, the round happened and you spoke for 5 minutes. You didn't end up moving the motion, but you spoke for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. You still spoke. If you'd like to speak on the second round, that's fine.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Barros.
I think the procedural bylaw lays it out quite clearly that
Mr. Clerk,
you get 5 minutes to speak on a motion. There was a motion, then the second was removed.
Okay, that's fine.
There was no motion on the floor now.
I understand.
You then
I understand your
decided to
point of
say,
order.
is someone else willing to second this
Councillor,
motion? We then had a new motion on the
Councillor,
floor.
I understand
to
your,
which everyone should have the opportunity to speak.
I understood your motion, your point of order quite a while ago.
Please let me finish.
Mr. Clerk. Could you provide some clarity on this?
To the chair, to members of council, The procedure bylaw is actually silent on the relationship between speaking time before a motion is moved and after a motion is moved. The procedure bylaw does specify that you can only speak twice on a motion, but it is silent otherwise. I can comment that the practice of council in the past has certainly been that the first member to speak, who then sometimes moves the first motion, that has been counted as the first speaking time in a round. But it is completely at council's discretion because the matter is silent.
Okay, well, I will say that just to rule on that, Councillor Munch, in fairness, I did ask you specifically if you were willing to move it, and you said yes. And so, okay, that's fine. Okay, well, I asked you if you were moving the motion. You said yes, and we proceeded. I know that, but I asked you if you were willing to move it. Go ahead, Councillor Munch. We'll put you in on the first round, and go ahead.
Can we please have, who defines the MTSA? Which level of government defines the MTSA?
Through the chair to Councillor Munch, the region identifies the MTSA. We at the local level get to determine what land use designations are in those MTSAs and what the heights and densities are.
So the province does not define the MTSA, the region defines the MTSAs in Ontario?
That's correct.
How many MTSAs do we have in Richmond Hill?
I don't have the exact number in front of me.
We have a motion on the floor. How are we supposed to know at council what it is when, does any member of council know how many MTSAs we have in Richmond Hill that we're about to vote on?
We'll find that in just momentarily. It's there. Maybe Miss
18.
Von Kersel can count those up.
I can confirm it's 18.
And how many of those 18 MTSAs are on a go station mode?
There's Richmond Hill Center. There's the Newkirk and Major Mackenzie, and there's Gormley. Those are the three on a go station.
So we're expecting 35% housing affordability on those 4 MTSAs going forward?
The regional policy is indicating that for all MTSAs, they should achieve 35% affordable housing with through new development. All we're saying is, in order to achieve the 35%, we need to be requesting it of every applicant that comes in the door once this policy is in effect.
Does the policy staff have an opinion or a position on who drives the growth of the MTSAs? It is driven from the region, from the local municipality, or is it driven from the region?
I'll try and answer that. I just may have to ask a question. So when you say the growth is driven, so what the region does, it starts with the region, and they've got a minimum number of people and jobs per MTSA. And then it's up to the municipality to refine that number if they wish, beyond the minimum, which we'll do in some cases, and maybe in others we may recommend that it's the minimum, and all of that is forthcoming in the sort of next phase of our OP update.
To the 3 representatives at York Region, can any of you answer me at the regional meetings in the last 6 months, has the region said that the drive should be happening from the local municipality or from the region down at the regional council? So I know that there's at least 2 mayors at the region who have said that we want to control our direction at the local level, and that they have asked that the region follow the local interests as a priority. I'm wondering if that's the position of our 3 representatives in Richmond Hill, at the region, or are we saying that Richmond Hill's local policy and interests are secondary to other municipalities within York Region?
Are you asking who are you asking?
I'm not a regional representative. I would
I'm
ask
just-
one of the three
Okay,
regional
well,
representatives.
so I can say to you from my time on the region, we have a housing affordability task force that's obviously very interested in affordability of housing and is starting to do some good work on that front. The region has outlined in their official plan targets for housing affordability, which I think our staff is trying to refine and make more specific to our own community. And that's the spirit of what we're trying to do here. I hope that answers your question.
Can any other two, because I can cite some motions and some states. I'm just waiting to see if our regional representatives, because that's
Okay, well,
not,
if this is a test, Counselor.
it's not a
okay,
test.
well,
I think it's
okay, I hope I passed the test. That's the answer that I would give you at this
Okay.
point in
I
time.
just think it's important for our council who's moving a motion that should have the most information so that we know and we can tell to the people of Richmond Hill. And because our policy staff are saying one thing and Aurora, Newmarket and King and Markham and Vaughan are saying quite a different thing. I'm wondering if our council has a different vision than the rest of York Region. Go ahead, Professor Crowley, please.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Munch. What was the question?
Does the region and the regional council have a position to say that the local municipalities should have a say in their local planning to drive the regional plan? Or is it the other way around, as our policy people are saying, that the region is telling the local municipalities, and only at that point, when they get directing to the local municipalities, will they be responsible for implementing a policy to meet the regional framework?
You're right.
Okay, so our policy
In
staff.
fairness, sorry, Counselor, I think Counselor DiPaolo, you've asked.
A stab at it.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not, so
No,
obviously.
Counselor DiPaolo wants to speak.
Oh,
Sorry.
The region, in circulating their draft official plan, is expecting local municipalities to comment on what specifically their municipality preferences would be before it's adopted. So that's why there's a deadline, and that's why we're here.
so how come we in Richmond Hill's policy and planning side don't recognize that our council and this municipality should have a say on how we want to drive our community, when today it's been communicated that the region is dictating to the Richmond Hill? It's the other way around. We set the parameters and we give commentary until March 31st. In fact, there's a deadline by the region. In fact, we at council passed a motion last year that staff ignored. We have a letter from the public. Who is being held, Ms. CAO, who is accountable for this? We have a staff who say that this council and our municipality doesn't matter. We have a staff that have not followed a directive by council. Who's responsible for this?
I don't know which one of you would like to answer that. Counselor, that's really not what we're talking about right
We
here.
are talking about this.
No.
We're moving a motion
Okay.
today.
Somebody from staff.
For you, Mr. Mayor, I will defer it to the Commissioner of Planning, who can speak the staff's position on this.
To you, Mr. Mayor, it's the prerogative of this council to, if they wish to challenge a policy which is imposed by the region in this draft official plan. I will point out, however, the 35% rule has been in effect since 2010. But if council wishes to pass a resolution to challenge that policy, that is your prerogative. All we are saying in this instance, if we're to follow the 35% rule, our advice is to apply the rule across each and every development rather than being selective on individual development look at all development applications as they come in rather than waiting for an aggregate to transpire over time and impose an undue penalty on those who are last in the door.
Thank you. My question to staff, has misinterpreted. I'm going to try to make it as clear as I possibly can. We passed a motion at council to give a direction to staff. Why wasn't that followed? Who's responsible for not following that?
Point of order.
Councillor Silvitz, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With all respect to Councillor Munch, that is not what is before us right now. He surfed away, as in my opinion, from the agenda item in front of us, the motion, and this should not be allowed.
Thank you. I agree. Councillor Munch, right now we're talking about the regional official
We have a motion
plan.
on the floor.
Yes, we do. And it is, right now, we need to be speaking to that motion on the floor. So go ahead. You still have some time left.
It's up to this council. This council is supreme. This council is supreme. This council is responsible for the people and the businesses in Richmond Hill. This motion in front of us that's saying we're rubber stamping, but we're not following the council direction as it relates to this because as was pointed by the regional councillor, deputy mayor, we have a March 31st deadline by the region to give input to the official plan so they can put our comments and our priorities to the region. Our policy staff have said contrary to that. We have a motion on the floor from last year. Wasn't done. Why? Here we are a week before the deadline by the region, and this council has to make a decision because we don't have any staff input. We didn't have any consultation directly.
Okay, Councillor, Mr. Hike, you want to weigh in? Go ahead.
I do apologize, Mr. Mayor, but the question that has been raised and regretfully, the action of staff has been impugned. That motion that is referred to in the correspondence and that the councillor is discussing, staff actually did fulfill all the steps set out in that motion, which were to send various correspondence on positions to various officials. We actually, upon receiving that the correspondence on today's agenda, reviewed our records and confirmed that we fulfilled all the steps and sent all the correspondence on council's position as required.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor,
Okay, well, hold, sir.
is there
Hold
still
on.
time?
The clerk just made a statement, sir. I sent an email out and I asked specifically 20 questions. And of those 20 questions, you're absolutely right. There were some items that in the motion, but our staff did not communicate or
Okay,
engage.
Councillor, that's your
It's
interpretation.
in writing, sir. It's in writing. It's in
Yeah,
writing.
that's fine. You're out of time at the present moment. We are going to a second round at this point. So Councillor DiPaolo, you were in on the second round.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we not have someone that could get access to the draft regional official plan? I have a couple of questions. If we're going to go forward with this, I fully support the staff's intent with this staff recommended motion moved by Councillor Chan. I'm in full support. I think the 2010 housing affordability target that was in there, it was great foresight to have it in our official plan. It wasn't achieved, and this resulting affordability crisis was exacerbated by the fact that we weren't able to hit the affordability targets. And I think staff has identified a major contributing factor that each application needs to be held to the standard in our major intensification areas. But I know we're going to run into a problem. So I have two questions, Mr. Mayor. Is Yonge and Bloomington currently identified as an MTSA in the draft regional official plan from the region?
Mr. Lee or Ms. Von Kersel?
I thought every one of our Viva stops were an MTSA.
Through the chair, only the Gormley GO station and the GO station at Newkirk and Major Mackenzie and the GO station at Richmond Hill Center. The Bloomington one is not identified as an MTSA. We never asked for that.
Okay, good, because I would have asked that we request that not be an MTSA. So, but Stouffville and Yonge, I guess the Viva stop south of Stouffville and Yonge is an MTSA. in the draft regional official plan?
Again, through you, through the chair, the most northerly MTSA does not go all the way up to Stouffville Road.
Jefferson and Young?
I don't believe so. It does go up to the Bernard KDA.
That's our most northerly MTSA on Young Street? No, not 19th? It's important that we,
19th and Gamble, sorry, my apologies. 19th and Gamble is.
that's the most northerly on Young Street. And of course, we have the Gormley GO Station. Okay, so do you have the list of MTSAs within Richmond Hill? Because they're numbered by the region in the regional official plan. Okay, well, what's the number that pertains to the Gormley GO Station?
Gormley GO Station is MTSA, 48.
I thought it was 48. Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to move an amendment in order for me to be able to support this. I'm fully supportive completely, but I just don't understand how Gormley GO would achieve that. And I think it may be difficult in other MTSAs, and it may be difficult for all future applicants. But if we were to have I'm trying to get the simplest amendment, proposing the simplest amendment possible that doesn't tie those people affected there, so that if it needs to be worded as recommended by staff as it is, that each new development application located within a regional center or MTSA, excluding MTSA 48, to be affordable. So in recommendation B, Roman numeral 2, that after MTSA, I'd like to propose a formal amendment, if there's a seconder, that we exclude MTSA 48.
Okay, so have
Point
you
of
captured that?
information.
A point of information, Councillor Barros?
So Regional Councillor DePaula is suggesting a motion to remove item 48.
MTSA 48?
48. I guess before I or someone else appears to be willing to second it, we need a bit more information, Councillor, into that motion. What is the logistical information, the background studies that you would be quoting to say that MTSA 48, which is only 48 people and jobs per hectare, is not going to be having any kind of affordability in it?
48 is a minimum 50 people and jobs per hectare. It's very different from all the other MTSAs. The minimum is 200 on a GO train. A bus rapid transit is 150, and it's 250 or higher at a subway stop. But the fact that it's 50 people and jobs per hectare, the region, and if you look at the chart, all the MTSAs across the region, the Gormley GO is very different. It's very different. I think it'd be impossible to achieve a 35%. I think it'd be possible to achieve 10% affordability at that MTSA. Impossible. So we would be recommending a change to the region, that if the region implemented our request, we would be sterilizing a critical MTSA in Richmond Hill, or making it near impossible.
So for once, I agree with you. But
So
I don't think you're broad enough. You should say, take the whole thing out. Let the market decide.
That's fine.
Let the
This
market
is
decide.
a comment you can make on the amendment, Councillor. So, Councillor, have we captured that, Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Ray. I certainly, I understand the amendment. If we have a seconder, then I'll draft it up while people are speaking to it. It's actually fairly straightforward in my view, what the councillor is asking us to do.
Okay, Councillor Barros, are you willing to second it, given that you agree with him? Okay. I would be willing to second it if nobody else is, but I would like to ask a question. I'd have to give up the chair.
Oh, yeah, gladly assume the chair.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so-
Mayor West.
Staff, can I just understand, I think I understand what it is that we're trying to achieve here. Can I ask what it is exactly that, or what would be your comments on this? I mean, if this is only applying to the Gormley Station MTSA, I think this makes perfect sense. I agree. I personally not sure that it should have been an MTSA in the first place, but I certainly agree with this. Is there some comment from staff on this? Some guidance you can give us? Anybody? Commissioner Kwan.
Through Mr. Mayor, I believe I understand the intent of Councillor DiPaolo's suggestion. I think we would be remiss as staff, though, to point out that just by changing or eliminating Gormley as from the 35% rule, that we would be eliminating the other applicable rules that apply to all MTSAs that are not protected, i.e. that they would still be required to have 25% affordable housing. So if it's your intent to go below that threshold, then that becomes a different issue altogether.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you explain? I'm not sure I understand what you meant. And it's my bad here, but if you could explain that again to me.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe I heard Councillor DiPaolo refer to the opportunities for the Gormley MTSA area to meet even 10% threshold, which is well below the minimum threshold for any MTSA, protected or otherwise. So if it's this council's will to exclude the MTSA at Gormley from any of the provisions of the affordable housing policy, then that becomes a different motion than the 25% rule. Otherwise, the 25% rule would be in effect automatically.
Okay, well, I would have a question then to Regional and Local Councillor DiPaolo. Is that your intention?
No, that's fine. I just wanted to exempt them from the 35% stringently requested new recommendation to the regional official plan. I mean, they will have to abide by all those other MTSA requirements.
Okay, so just one more time to staff then, if I may. So if in your professional opinion, staff, this is a one-off that really only deals with a special circumstance. It's not going to radically impact the rest of the comment or the structure of the regional official plan that we're sending back to the region.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I would agree with that statement. It's a one-off. And all staff were recommending is that we have a more equitable distribution of how we apply the affordable housing policy for all applications in those in MTSAs and protected MTSAs, okay, so that we are fair to all applicants or developers coming through the door.
Okay, I will second the motion then. I'm satisfied with that.
Thank you. And you can take the chair back, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, so on the amendment then, so hold on one second, Councillor Pirelli, I see you. Just give me 1 second. Okay, go ahead, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question to staff. This motion is going to change one MTSA and exempt it from all the rules that apply to the other MTSA. Fair enough. It's going to go from, I guess, 35 to 25, according to Commissioner Kwan. Mr. Lee, are the numbers that Councillor Barrows quoted in affordability of 88,000 being the median income? Is that roughly? I'm not trying to hold you to a real number, but.
So through the chair to Councillor Pirelli, the median income is 88,000. The affordable housing policy aims at the 60th percentile of that 88,000. So, here's a rough number. It's like 468,000 is an affordable price. And we're seeing bachelors in one bedrooms meeting that affordable price, although it's getting harder as the prices of real estate and houses and apartments keep going up.
Come on.
So-
Come on.
Director, sorry,
Come on.
Councillor Munch is very upset. I don't blame him, but can you reverse engineer it for me, please? Because it's important. 88,000, is it 60% of that number?
So
what's the income that you're using? Not the purchase price, the income.
Okay. I don't have that figure in front of me, unfortunately. We could look it up.
I'm happy to wait, stop the clock and wait. This is very important because at 88,000, look, if you can stop the clock, please, because I'm answering a question here. I've had to answer it 6 times and I won't be able to have that opportunity in this amendment. But my calculation is that 30% of 88,000 comes out to a number of $2,208 a month in a purchase, backing out taxes, water, heat, hydro, those types of things. You're looking at $1,700 maximum purchase price in today's numbers. We have a realtor in the audience that can confirm this if necessary. I have 30 years experience in that field. Is approximately $350,000 purchase price. So that's with a $50,000 down payment. $350,000. I don't know of a property anywhere in Richmond Hill that has sold for $350,000 in the last 5 years, and price is still going up. So there's nothing. So this amendment will sterilize that property. No building can take place on that property at 35%, 25%, or 10%. It's not possible. It would be an artificial number. Is this what this council wants? To misrepresent what is really practically possible? Mr. Lee, please chime in because.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Ms. Von Kersel to, if she can, to quickly look up in our affordable housing strategy, the numbers that everyone's asking for are in there, both the monthly rental price as well as the sales price. The last sales price that was affordable that I saw, the last calculation, was more than $350. I think it was $467 or thereabouts. So we can get those numbers. It just might take a minute.
Happy to wait.
We do have on slide 13 of the presentation the definition of affordable that the region is using. And we also have a chart that we had presented to council a while back with respect to the affordable housing strategy that identifies the 6th percentile and what the household income was for 2019, which is $118,000 for ownership housing. It's much less for the rental housing because we're looking at a smaller segment of the population. And the values on those basis, most recently, because household income is slightly going up, not at the same rate as the cost of housing, was $480,000 approximately would be an affordable house based on that 6th percentile.
What was sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. What was that number? I couldn't hear.
The house price?
Yes.
$482,413 is the most recent information that we have.
For a house?
For an ownership unit.
An ownership unit, sorry, please.
So like an apartment.
There's a lot of chatter here between the deputy mayor and the mayor. I'm having a hard time hearing you. When you say ownership, there's a big difference between single family, detached, and condominium ownership. Which one are you referring to?
Well, the definition doesn't get into the type of unit. but what you're looking at is, what's the purchase price? And this is the reason why we're limiting the policy change to only the MTSA properties, because those are the ones where you will see apartment units. We recognize that's where it's most likely to be achieved.
No, but this motion, sorry, so you answer the right question. This motion is about bringing it down to removing the 35% in the MTSA. It's still 25%.
No, I'm sorry. The motion is just saying don't require it of each development application within the Gormley MTSA. So
Right.
everywhere else, all other MTSAs, we can be a little bit more prescriptive and say for all, every new development that comes in, 35% of the units should be, at or below that threshold price. And the threshold price changes from year to year as household incomes change.
But when you say, when you say that it's ownership,
Yes.
there has to be a distinction. Are they building high rises in the Gormley MTSA?
No,
Is that the
and I think
expectation?
that's the reason why Regional Councillor DePaulo would like to remove the Gormley MTSA from this prescriptive policy, because
But
there's
it's
a
still going to
recognition.
be, but the commissioner said it's still going to be 25%.
However, what we're asking for in this policy change only is related to the 35%. We are not saying when it comes to development outside of the regional centers and MTSAs, it should be on a per applicant basis, because we recognize that's not likely to happen. We also recognize, and it's stated in the staff report, that to achieve that 25% outside of those areas could also happen through policies like missing middle development, like secondary units, and other mechanisms where we can provide a range of affordable housing, even within our existing housing stock, and not necessarily through new development each time. So the recommendation is specific to MTSAs, and with the qualification that's identified here, not including the MTSA at Gormley, because it's a much lower minimum density requirement and it's not a protected MTSA. My professional opinion is that this is an appropriate modification, and it's achievable.
And why wasn't, if this was an appropriate modification, I'm just curious, why didn't staff make that recommendation?
It's a fair question. We were looking at it, broadly from the regional perspective, and not thinking of, specifically, identifying what MTSA it shouldn't apply to. But I think the suggestion of not applying it to ones that are not identified as protected, that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, we didn't think of it right from the beginning.
So I guess it begs the question, is there any other things that staff would like to reconsider that would make more sense?
Well, we only have the two recommendations in the report in terms of ones that we feel council should advance to the region, but you'll also note in the appendix of the report, we have provided a number of suggestions for regional staff to consider as they, take in all of the comments that they receive from all of the municipalities and the public. But the two recommendations that we've identified here are the ones that, are specific to Richmond Hill, and are the ones that we feel are things that we would really like to see the region reconsider.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Von Kersel. I don't see any other.
Not done.
Is your time? Sorry, I thought your time. Oh, my apologies. Go ahead. I thought that I only heard the first bell. You're right.
May I continue? Well, thank you. I have a real problem with doing this kind of stuff on the fly. I mean, at the last minute, now we're being told that, a member of council has made a very good point. in having this discussion. And that's great. And it really begs the question, what other things can be improved upon? Would you agree, Councillor Munch? Councillor Munch agrees. You know, I think all areas should be affordable. Not 35% of it should be affordable. I think they should all be affordable. That's how they sell. I mean, if they're not affordable, nobody will buy them. I know for a fact that you cannot buy a single family detached property for $465,000 in Richmond Hill. And if anybody has any, I'll buy them all. No limit. I'll buy all of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Munch on the amendment. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'd like to have a definition of all this because as we've learning more and more, the definitions of one person is totally different than the other, different from staff. And we have, as we just heard now, it's a good idea, but we didn't propose it. Well, of course, council doesn't have any ideas, so we have to rely on the region who are asking for input. So now this motion says amend the draft regional official plan. Imagine Richmond Hill's considering to make a motion to the region. First time I think we've done this. Wow, what leadership we're showing. At a minimum 35% in each of the new development applications located in Richmond Hill Center or MTSAs. Are there any timelines for this? Or are we just going to say this is for the entire 30 years? Is that clear?
Okay, so Councillor Munch, this is on the amendment.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that this amendment is for the 30. I want to make sure I understand the language. Is it for 30 years? Or is it for 1 year? Is it for 6 months until Friday?
Well, I would assume that if this passes, it goes into the main motion and it is in the same timeline as the main motion. If I'm in staff, can you chime in to make sure that that's correct? Would be my understanding.
That's correct. It would go into the regional official plan if the region agreed with this change to the motion, and it would stay there until the next review of the regional official plan.
Okay, so on the amendment, Councillor Munch, go ahead.
So there was a search done while we're having this conversation that 17 properties have sold under 480,000 in the last 6 months. Most 1 bedroom, some studios, and just from 2 bedroom. And just for everybody knows, I may ask for a recess because at 3:30, Tim Hudak has chimed in, who is in charge of AREA, who's one of the authors of the housing affordability, is going to call me. So I'm going to recuse myself to take his call to talk about some of these items that I'm bringing forward now, as this is being monitored and others by, just to give you guys all a context. This game that we're playing, it has such real ramifications. That's watched from all circles. That I'm getting a phone call during a council meeting in 6 minutes. Hope we're proud of ourselves. Yeah. So it relates to this is I'm okay with the amendment. I really would like to hear from the ward councillor to see where this is at because we're picking and choosing here. And I'm not really sure why we're choosing one area over another or what the mindset is. Because as Councillor Pirelli was saying, we're doing this on the fly. And although I just don't know. So my thoughts are I just don't know.
Okay, thank you. So we have an amendment and I don't see any other speakers. So on the amendment then, all those in favor? Okay, recorded vote. There was no other speakers. Okay, Mr. Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you. On the amendment, moved by Regional Local Councillor DePaula, Councillor Silovitz.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Silovitz, you cut out there for a second. Did you?
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula. Thank you, Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor West.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Barros.
This is just moving this back to the main motion. We're not voting on the motion. correct?
That's correct. It's an amendment to change the main motion. Yes.
I'll vote no at this. Not going to vote for the main motion.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
Nothing is more important than affordable housing. My answer is no.
Thank you, Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. The amendment does carry.
Okay, thank you. So we're back to the main motion. I've got no other speakers at this point. Okay, so on the main motion, you want to speak again? Okay, go ahead.
Questions. My calculations are showing that you did say 118,000 would be the 60th percentile of Richmond Hill income, household income. 118,000 divided by two, times 30% is $35,000. That $35,400. Divided by 12 is very close to $3,000 a month. Almost anything we can achieve that's rental would fall under that threshold. I mean, I'm sure any new purpose-built rental would be so. But we're talking. I've got $2,960 per month, and I'm certain that definition that the region
Point of
uses
information.
doesn't. So we're talking about housing affordability.
Sorry, Councillor DePaulo.
Oh.
Councillor Barros.
Does the motion in front of us not speak to purchase? That was the whole definition I thought we heard through the staff.
I
For the
think
purchase.
I think it's affordability in general, if I'm not mistaken, is it not?
The number 118.
Councillor DePaulo, go ahead.
Number 118 was quoted for purchase. Not in your head.
Okay, I think it
What's the rental number?
would also be the same formula that would be applied for monthly rental.
Numbers lower.
Ms. Von Kersel, could you clarify?
Sure. I think, first of all, the 118,000 is the median, the 60th percentile income for all households in Richmond Hill, so ownership and rental. In accordance with the region's definition, when we go to determine what is the affordable price for rental housing, there are two options to look at. One is the household income of all rental households, or using the average market rent. And in the case of York Region, what they do is they look at the average 125% of the average market rent, and they've identified that as the rental housing threshold price, which I think I quoted, sorry, as 1,000. Let me just get back to that. $1,831. But yes, so in that regard, what Regional Council DePaulo is doing is looking at, for all households, what is a rent that is feasible from a monthly basis. But if you look at just the current rental households, those households are getting an income, are having at the 60th percentile of rental households is $56,000. So
Okay.
that's okay.
That's a very significant clarification that I needed to understand. So that, but
Point
that
of
29,
information.
the 20,
Okay, can I just ask, is this something that can wait until after he's finished or, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Does that number include the subsidized?
it's not a point of information.
How is that not information? I'm wondering if these average household at 118,000 is inclusive of the subsidized housing, or is that net? So I'm wondering, is this include a government subsidy or not include a government subsidy?
Okay, I don't have the answer to that.
Well, that's why it's a point of information.
This doesn't pertain to the wording of the motion.
Go ahead, Ms. Von Kersel.
I think if you look at slide 13, we have a chart that shows the percentiles, household percentiles, and what the incomes are. It's not a straight line. So each percentile group has different values. when we're in accordance with the definition that's not only in the regional official plan, it's also a provincial policy statement definition. We look at what is the income of the household at the 60th percentile. And that's sort of the gauge in determining what is a reasonable price threshold for affordable. What we're trying to show here is when you do it based on the 60th percentile, there are still going to be households who will be paying more than 30% of their income to purchase or rent housing. What we're trying to do is, as you can see from the graph, there's the ability to purchase can be much higher beyond the 60th percentile, but it's also much lower when you go down from the 60th percentile. But in accordance with provincial policies and as well the regional policy, we look at what is the reasonable, only paying 30% towards your mortgage. What is that house value? And again, in terms of rental, we're not looking necessarily at the household incomes. We're looking at what is average market rent, 125% of that average.
I'm having a hard time hearing her.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, my apologies.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor DePaulo.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kersel. So, and it doesn't include utilities or anything else. So we're talking, it's a mortgage price that you're paying, the monthly mortgage price. So, okay, and it wouldn't assume a zero down payment, would?
No. I'll have to go back and look at our
Probably
our
take an
strategy,
average.
but there's
So-
assumptions in terms of interest rate and there's assumptions
Yeah.
in terms of down payment and all.
They have
those
a
are
built-in
factored in.
assumption.
Yes.
Because I know a $600,000 mortgage is $2,400 a month, and that's significantly less. You can go. It is $2,950 a monthly payment. However they calculate that, that's the size of the mortgage that would still be considered affordable housing. At $2,950 a month, on a very good rate, and we'll have to use whatever provincial rates provided, but the range would be somewhere between $600,000 and $900,000 mortgage that could be carried with nearly $3,000 a month if you go on the ownership side.
Okay,
Well,
are we?
for ownership purposes, we're talking about the 60th percentile is $120,000. Okay, someone making $120,000. Well, we're going to be requiring each and every applicant within, the intensification areas, which is almost everywhere where we're going to expect to see major proposals. We're going to be requiring each and every applicant to provide 35% of their units to meet this affordability criteria, in their initial offering of their new products. So this is a request we're making to the region. Mr. Lee, how likely do you think it would be that the region will just take Richmond Hill Council's proposed amendment and just throw it into the plan? Or how likely, can you comment at all on whether you think the region will amend their plan based on our request?
It's really hard to say. Staff will ruminate over it, and then the regional politicians will have to consider it. I just couldn't give you an answer.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm supportive of the motion, and I think this is the right path to go down to make the request, and I'll be advocating for it at the regional level. We are in a crisis, a housing affordability crisis. The region, I moved it at the region. The region, as a council, declared a housing affordability crisis. But there's all sorts of different attempts to create more affordable housing. This is one of them. I think it's a great proposal by our staff, and one that I will support and continue to support. And if people understand this definition, then obviously our houses in Richmond Hill are extremely expensive. But there's an affordability criteria that I think we should be forcing applicants to meet so that our young people can afford to live in the city they grew up in, and that are our seniors can afford to retire in the city that they've lived their whole lives.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Regional Local Councillor Pirelli. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. You know, we have at the region, we've announced an affordability crisis. I think, you know, it's very, very confusing to the public. How can I state to someone, two beautiful people starting off in life, working at Tim Hortons or at Burger King and trying to make ends meet at $15, $16 an hour, or even $20 an hour, which is decent pay according, you know, to our governments up ahead of us. And you tell them, we're meeting the affordable housing crisis. All you have to do is come up with about $100,000 down payment, and you can buy a nice one-bedroom condo for $600,000 in Richmond Hill. Or you can rent something for $1,400 a month, which, by the way, does not exist unless you're under-housing them and you're putting them in basement apartments that are dingy and moldy. I happen to be an expert, a professional at multi-family residential dwellings, and I can tell you that this is not reasonable. If we want to address affordability, then we have to make it affordable to the people who are working in our community and have them be able to sustain a family. And at minimum wage, no one can afford a $600,000 mortgage, as the deputy mayor has suggested. So this is not affordable. We're pulling the wool over people's eyes. We're not. Moving this motion does not address affordability. I challenge you to bring me in anybody who says, yeah, I work 40 hours a week. I even have a part-time job on top of that. And you know what? Thank you so much. I can now buy a condo for $650,000. That is sad to think that we're sitting up here patting ourselves on the back. Good job, members of council. We've done it. We have solved the affordability problem. We have Mr. Zahari here in the audience. He would love to find a house for every person in Richmond Hill who's on minimum wage, a house or property for $650,000. Unfortunately, they will not qualify. So until we have meaningful solutions to affordability, I'm not going to pretend that this is a solution. This is not even close to a solution. So shame on anybody who thinks that this is a solution to the affordability problem. Shame, shame, shame. I will not support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Barros.
Thank you. Along the same lines, just quickly going to, realtor.ca MLS. There is currently one unit that I can find for sale in and around a price like that, but it's in the Mongshong building. So I don't know. There may be criteria with it because they say they can't even give you a status certificate. So it sounds like it's more of an old age home setting than I could buy it and live there as an individual. So when I start to take a look at it and I go, yes, here we are again saying things that really the market dictates, not us. So I will not support this for the foremost comments we've made. We need to have meaningful conversation on this. The province and the feds, they have opportunities to change some of the regulatory systems, the red tape, we like to call it. There's not enough red tape at our level that we have the ability to clear out of the way to say, now look at the purchase house costs have gone down. Not our job to fix. We'd like to say it because it's attractive, it's sexy, It's a conversation on the street. It's real. No one's denying that. But when we say we're fixing or we got solutions, we're just we're candy dressing things. So unfortunately, I won't be able to support it. I will continue to fight for the residents in Oak Ridges and the greater Richmond Hill on items that I can change. And on items I can't change, I will advocate to the appropriate levels of government. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. So, Councillor Munch.
So it's really concerning to me when we have a concept that we have forecast by our own consultants. We have a unanimous approval on council in 2019. We have no opinion about trying to meet any forecasts, yet we charge people based upon future forecasts, which raises the costs of housing, hurting our housing affordability, yet we spend staff time and more consulting and council time to talk about these housing affordability and affordable housing. Here we have a March 31st deadline by the region for Richmond Hill and all municipalities to give input. And how many of us on council did that? You just heard today our staff say, we don't have input. The region tells us we shouldn't give input. Markham's doing it. Vaughan's doing it. Newmarket's doing it. Aurora moves motions, they're doing it. Heaven forbid the 15% of the gross domestic product of the region and the lion's share, because the big pipe got postponed. So the big pipe up in East Gwillimbury, Aurora, Newmarket, they can't build homes unless you want to have an outhouse. So they're supposed to get the growth to Richmond Hill. Oh, but it doesn't matter because we're not approving housing anyway. But we're charging people enormous development charges and charging a premium. Oh, we don't have the population growth then, right? Well, that's why we're putting new infrastructure in, higher costs. Might that afford our housing affordability? You bet. Oh, how's the housing starts time frame according to the Housing Affordability Panel? Oh, we're amongst the worst on the planet. And do starts and time and lag have a cost component? Absolutely. But it's okay because we got our staff to control it. But the people can't afford to live here. Heaven forbid a PSW ever wants to live in Richmond Hill. No chance. Heaven forbid our service sector wants to live in Richmond Hill. Yesterday, we had people coming into Ward 4 saying, yeah, my children can't live here. They got to move elsewhere. Yeah, $118,000 to have a basic shelter, and we're not addressing it. And it's getting worse. Heaven forbid if we have inflation and interest rates go up. Heaven forbid when real income doesn't grow, when we have housing going up at 20%. And why is housing going at 20%? Has anybody even asked that question? Why is housing going up? Well, land prices, right? Why is land prices going up? Because we're sprawling. Of course, we know because we have great planning experts, right? Who've been around the world and traveled and seen things, knows that when we sprawl and we make it very difficult, and as the Ward 5 councillor said, well, as we can only go in height, how does that work? Well, that's okay. We'll increase DCs by 17%. That's the answer at the region. Let's increase the cost for those people to come forward. And because the developers will pay, right? You're dreaming. Developers pass that cost on to the buyers. So we keep increasing costs, have long bureaucracy. We have no plan to agree with it. Here we are a week before the deadline of the region. And shame for members of staff and others who want to be professional or be perceived as professional. When we're here today,
Councillor, I would ask you to be respectful of staff and others. You can speak.
My comment, don't interrupt my comment. Don't interrupt my sentence. Do not interrupt my sentence mid-frame.
No, it's a point of order. I would ask you to
cannot take it out of context, sir.
No, I would ask you not to impugn staff. Go ahead.
I will say my sentence again. For those that wish to be professional, and we expect to have an output to try to help serve our residents. When we have the second least housing affordable municipality in Ontario, I mean, that's not a winning record. And our numbers from 2016, when it comes out later this year, doesn't anybody have any pride? Our children and the next generation, this is the last generation that will own a home. Last generation. That's what we planned for. The 2006 growth plan of 50 jobs and homes per hectare is a minimum with 200 the target was not executed by municipalities in Southern Ontario. And the attack on the green belt and the attack of sprawl into rural Ontario is a reflection of municipalities. And here we are today talking about housing affordability, and we're scratching the surface. When are we going to have a real discussion? We heard today, that's a good idea. Yeah, we had that. It's a good thing you brought forward. But we didn't. Yeah, good idea. That's good. Any other ideas? I don't know. It's so frustrating to see people get hurt. It's so frustrating to see higher crime. It's so frustrating when we say families can't live here. It's so frustrating when our consultants aren't taking with full respect. When they make recommendations, we don't implement them. It's so frustrating when we move motions and they're not done.
Okay, thank you,
Frustrating.
Councillor. Your time is up. I don't see any, oh, sorry, Councillor Chan, go ahead.
Thank you. I think I'm sitting here at the what we call book ends here. I appreciate the discussions because it brings out, our different viewpoints on this, and this is important for our democratic process. I would respectfully suggest, Mr. Chair, perhaps the clerk would help putting up the motion in front of us. There's a number of components, and I can see that discussion for the last probably hour and a half or close to 2 hours is focused on one of the, I believe, 4 or even 5. Yeah, 4, right. On B2 primarily. I would suggest that to have the voting to be separate, perhaps if the my colleagues may not be able to support specifically B2, but voting separately. Because some of the things I'm hearing, there's 23 pages, well, not full pages, but there's 23 pages under C item. There are comments from staff. In fact, some are specifically seeking clarification on affordability, seeking clarification about MTSA, seeking clarification such as, talking about the Young North Subway, talking about Barfoot Street. Now, Barfoot Street has significance because, it's boundary between Richmond Hill and the city of Vaughan. And I'm sure my regional colleagues will appreciate then that would be at the regional level, probably looking at input or comments from the neighboring municipalities working together in this upper tier. So my point is that, Mr. Chair, if you consider to have voting A, B1, C, and D as one block, unless there's different views, and the B2 separately, because I don't seem to hear my colleagues are disputing. We should let the region knows about the 23 pages of comments, including clarification they're seeking that actually reflect some of my colleagues are saying at the other end in C. So my suggestion is don't just kill or not support the whole motion, but certainly if there's an item we have an issue with, then we can really separate out. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor, just to clarify, what are you suggesting in terms of separating it? This is a little bit, I think this may be hard to separate, but can you give us some guidance on that?
Thank you. I thought I just said it. Either we could have A, B1, and CD as a block, subject to the concurrence.
Okay, so essentially, sorry, I'm sorry, Councillor Chan. So essentially, you're just moving out number B2
to vote separately.
Okay, so A, B,
One.
B1, C, and D could be made together, and then B2 could be separated. Is that possible?
Subject to the
Mr.
rules, or we can take B out.
Thank you. I see where the council is going. So interestingly enough, I actually think we have to reverse that. I think we have to vote on B2 first.
Right.
Because B2 is dependent on the first part of B. So we could vote on B2 as a separate entity to see if that passes, and then leave it open for the other clauses to be voted on.
All right, so that's what's been called.
What point of clarification?
Okay, there is no such thing, but
Point of information.
go ahead.
The counselor just used words like we had to talk about definitions and words, and he wanted to separate that. So I would say to you, wasn't that an example of asking for a referral motion or something to that effect because you're asking for further clarification and further language? Isn't that the nature of what you're asking for? What's the point of separating it?
Okay, that would not be my interpretation.
That's what
but
I heard
won't-
him say. I heard him say
Okay,
definitions.
It's my turn to talk now. That's not what I heard, but Councillor Chan, could you provide some clarity on that?
Well, I never utter a word referral.
Okay.
I'm referring to the 23 pages of comments provided by staff, which is an item C. That's part of this motion. And these are the comments that, subject to my colleagues, with a majority would say, oh yeah, that including those, in those comments in those 23 pages, it actually asks for certain things. And I believe my colleague, Councilor Muncher, talked about including such as, I can cite you one. It's been talking about that on page 2, for example, we ask, is there any prioritization for the principals? So it's a question.
Okay, so
It's a
Councillor Chan,
comment,
I
but it's
think
also a
that-
question.
I
But
think
it's
that
never
answers
any
it.
intent
Okay.
of referral. I think they answered the question.
So I think
Mr.
so
Mayor.
too. Okay, so we don't have any other speakers at this moment for this, so we're going to go with B2 first. And anybody want a recorded vote? Okay, recorded vote, and then we'll go with the rest of the motion after that. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Sorry, I apologize, Mr. Mayor. I think we have to go with B2, then the rest of B, right? And then we'll
sure.
deal with it, just so that we're clear, okay? I apologize. Voting on clause B sub 2, Councillor Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor West.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Munch.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
No, thank
Thank you. Councillor Barrows.
No.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Clause B2 does carry, so if I might, we'll move to just carry the rest of clause B, and then we'll deal with the rest. So voting on clause B1, Councillor Sullivan.
Sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
I'm still reading it.
Regional Local Councillor Pirelli, please.
You have to give me some time to read it. I apologize.
I'm actually not permitted to. The vote's been called.
Well,
I
then
have
do
to
as you
take your
please.
vote. Yes. But Councillor Pirelli, your vote, please. Councillor Pirelli, in accordance with the procedure bylaw, the failure to vote is counted as an abstention, and it would be counted as a no.
Carry on, please.
Councillor Munch.
I mean,
Councillor Munch, please, on clause
never
B1.
even discussed. I mean, I don't even know.
Sure.
Do we even have any comment on Metrolinx?
Sorry,
We don't have
Ca-
commentary.
Councillor Munch, the vote has been called. Can I have your vote, please? Otherwise, I will have to treat it as an abstention.
Sure, it's a recommendation. Sure, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Barrows.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor West.
Yes.
Thank you. That clause does carry, and that entire clause B does carry. So now voting on clauses A, C, and D. Councillor Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Liu. Sorry, Councillor
Yes.
Liu. Thank you. Councillor Munch. Councillor Munch, please, on clause A, C, and D.
So the region be advised,
Councillor Munch, please.
No.
No, thank you. Councillor Barros.
Yes.
Thank you. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd. Thank you. Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Councillor
welcome.
Chan.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Mayor West.
Yes.
Thank you. Clauses A, C, and D do carry, and the entire motion is carried.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is 13.1, and we do, I believe, oh, wait a second, my apologies. The next item on the agenda is, right, 12.1, which is referring to 13.10, a delegation by Doug Fairchild and Blair Perbity from Electra Utilities Corporation. We're just waiting for them to come on the line. There we go. Hello, Mr. Fairchild.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon.
Welcome. Thank you for your patience. And we would invite you to make your delegations. You've got 5 minutes to address council.
Okay.
Go
Thank
ahead
you
when
very
you're
much.
ready.
Okay. On behalf of Electra Utilities, I would like to thank the mayor and the members of council for allowing me to speak today. Construction of a 4-circuit pole line on the west side of Leslie Street between Major Mackenzie and Elgin Mills began May of last year. That construction was paused at the request of the residents, the local councillor, and the acting mayor. 2 separate town hall meetings were held over the course of last summer and fall. The concerns of the residents were heard, alternative supply options were reviewed and costed out. I would like to review those options in front of this council today. Could I ask you please go to page 1? Perfect, thank you. Option 1 is the original design consisting of 85 and 95 foot tall poles supporting 4 circuits on the west side of Leslie Street. The reason the poles are so tall is because we need to have a safe amount of clearance between our electrical wires and the existing own city streetlights. Next option, option 2. You could scroll down, please. Perfect. Option 2 represents the full underground solution along Leslie Street. Option 3 is the hybrid of an underground along the west side of Leslie Street, as well as rebuilding the existing pole line on the east side from 2 circuits to 4 circuits. Option 4 is similar to the original design, except the poles are 10 to 15 feet shorter, and the existing street lights on the west side are installed on the same hydro poles. And finally, option 5. Option 5 consists of building a 2-circuit pole line along the west side of Leslie Street, as well as rebuilding the existing pole line on the east side from 2 circuits to 4 circuits. Thank you for the slides. Last summer, a decision was made and agreed to move forward with option 4. Electra and Richmond Hill worked together to redesign the 4-circuit pole line to include relocating the existing street lights off their own poles and installing them onto the hydro poles. At this point in time, Electra is prevented from proceeding with option 4 construction, as we cannot move the city-owned street lighting system without council's permission. Council approved a motion on February 23rd to support option 5 as the preferred option for servicing the Barker Business Park. To reiterate, option 5 requires a new pole line to be constructed on the west side of Leslie Street. That is the resident side. Instead of 4 circuits like option 4, this option has 2 circuits. In addition, the existing pole line on the east side would have to be redesigned and rebuilt from 2 to 4 circuits. However, due to the passage of time, option 5 is no longer a viable option, as it would take an additional 12 months to redesign and rebuild the existing pole line. As council is aware, Electra is obligated under their electricity license to provide power to residences and businesses within Richmond Hill as defined by our service territory. Construction has essentially been paused for 10 months now. In order to meet the required customer in-service date for power by the end of June, Electra must commence construction immediately. The cost to the city to relocate the lights and remove the abandoned streetlight poles is estimated at $200,000. Electra is prepared to proceed with option 4 at no additional cost to Richmond Hill. All things considering, it is Electra's opinion that option 4 is the best alternative solution. If option 4 is not endorsed by council today, Electra will unfortunately have no other choice but to proceed with the original option 1 design. Thank you for allowing Electra to speak to this matter, and I'll certainly make myself available and stay online for any questions you may have. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fairchild. Okay, so at this point in time, I'd like to bring it back. This is a Ward 3. It's located in Ward 3, so I'll bring it back to the Ward 3 Councillor. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the delegation. Yes, it's been 10 months. I am tired of repeating myself. On behalf of the residents, this is, another day of frustration for my Ward 3 residents. We have been now pushed into a corner that, you take it or leave it. We have no other choices other than, we have to go for option 4. Honestly, I don't have much to say today, except for expressing my frustration and my residents' frustration. And I just would like to quote one email from my residents, I think which is very well written, and it reflects the feeling of the whole neighborhood. And quote, "We are presented a whole lot of options, and now Electra is saying option 5 is not viable since it would delay the project another year. Just another example of Electra's lack of transparency. This whole pretend process of listening to community concerns is a charade. What else is there to fight for? They've run out the clock on us. Shame on Electra for their lack of openness and using the threat of the legislative hammer to force their will on the community." And my residents also suggested that to nickname Leslie Street to Megawatt Alley, or Canada's version of third world infrastructure. It will be a constant reminder to Electra how callous they've been to the residents. And I will end at this. And I would also like to say to Mr. Fairchild and Mr. Burbity, as nothing personal. I really, not meaning, we, the residents, are not meaning to attack you, but we are not happy with the system. We are not happy with Electra as a whole. So please don't take it personal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, I need a motion. Councillor Silovitz, I saw your hand up.
Yes.
So you will move to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Sorry. Yeah. So what I would do is, let's just get the motion on the floor and then I'll have some comment. I would move option 4, please, from staff report SRP 122038 from February the 9th. Option 4.
Mr. Clerk, you've got that. Can you put that up on the screen?
And I would ask that we ensure that this option says all costs will be covered by Electra. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Silovitz, did you have any other further comments?
Thank you. No, the only thing I wanted to say was I want to thank Councillor Liu for reading that heartfelt email into the record. I think that the comments, the feelings, the anger, the frustrations of the residents who live in this area are valid. And I want to commend the local councillor on his engagement here, and then acting Mayor DePaulo as well. And I also want to commend the residents, because there's nothing like residents stepping forward and speaking out. While in this particular case, you may have failed, for want of a better word, your voice was still heard, and you made this issue front and center. And you also made this issue something that perhaps needs to be forwarded to our two MPPs, so that this can also be dealt with on a provincial level. Because as I've said before, when I spoke to this issue, we must remember that the Provincial Electricities Act trumps everything here. And Electra, because of that legislation, has the ability to do what they need to do. So I hope that somewhere along the line, the MPPs have truly been alerted to this. And I would assume that Councillor Liu has done that. Thank you. And I would really like to hear the answers, and I would like to see what happens moving forward here with the provincial government, because this could be an election issue, people. There is an election coming up this summer. So those are my comments. My thanks to Councillor Liu for this. It's been a very difficult ride for him. And I will move this option because I do believe that it's the only one that is now in front of us. And if we don't, we are going to have even more of a problem. And there is a very specific date here that Electra needs to have the recommendations and approvals from council. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Silovitz. Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor Shepherd, did you want to speak to this?
Yes. I was not a part of the conversation at the time of the last council meeting when the residents came and spoke on this matter. I'd like to commend the residents of Ward 3 for banding together and speaking out against this. It's unfortunate that option 5 is no longer on the table. And I guess we're left with no choice but to go ahead and support this option, even though I feel that it's highly unfair to the residents that they had to deal with this in this manner.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Councillor Munch.
So I'd like to ask if it's possible to make an amendment to the motion whereby we add a B to say that we at council are disappointed with this choice, that we are encouraged based upon the comments that were made by the first and seconder, that we are left in a time position and we're given effectively an ultimatum of which we felt we had to act. I would like to also add a C, which would be, we would like all members of our provincial parliament to get a copy of this. And I would like to add a D to say specifically, we send a specific letter to the member of parliament, Michael Parsa, to ask for his engagement, if at all possible, to talk to the Electra and send a copy of that and give a report back to this council. That's what I'd like to move those amendments, if I may.
Okay, that's a lot to capture, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. If I might.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Prelli.
Do we have a seconder to this motion before we start talking
Yes.
about amendments?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I must have dozed off for a moment.
Mr. Mayor, I will seek some clarification. I'd be remiss if I didn't comment that it is not normal to offer negative motions.
Yeah.
That being said, I would also comment that council has at least twice previously instructed us to express its disappointment within the last couple of months, and we have sent letters to the MPPs and a range of other people. So we have already done that. So well, certainly council can pass the motion. It would be fairly repetitive at this juncture, but I cannot in good conscience recommend doing negative motions. So yes.
Okay, Councillor Munch, I would agree, but I mean, it's up to you to move it. I think the part about sending the letters to the MPPs, if you wanted to put in an amendment like that, I think what I'm hearing is that's fine.
We did not, we said we are sending a letter to the member of provincial parliament. We did not say we are sending a letter and would appreciate some feedback. So I have not received any feedback from the member of provincial parliament. I don't know if he just received it and threw it in the waste paper basket. I think the residents would very much like to know, and I would like to know if anything was done. I think it would be nice as a courtesy if the member of provincial parliament were to engage with the residents and talk to them about the situation.
Okay, fair enough, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, happy to craft the motion and requesting that. I would be remiss if I don't comment that we cannot compel the members of parliament to, and as a normal course of action, when we correspond with members of council, with members of parliament on these matters, we do specifically say for your attention and action and response as deemed necessary by the member. So we do that in the normal course of business.
Great.
So
I think.
So my motion that I want to craft, thank you so much for that input. I love listening to input. We are asking our member of provincial parliament. We are not asking to be his emperor and direction. We'll let the residents decide that. But what we're saying here today is that our council is moving forwards on this as expressed by the mover, as expressed by the ward councillor, of which I would like to support, and the residents. I don't believe this to be a demeaning action. It's a proactive action with the local member of provincial parliament who may share our view. And I think also seeing that Mr. Fairchild, who is the government relationships person, as per my records, I think it'd be good for him to engage with all levels of government. He probably would love to engage with the member of provincial parliament. I'm sure the residents would love to enjoy it. Well, I would like to move that motion whereby, again, we ask our member of provincial parliament directly, the person of record, Michael Parsa, who's the current member, to be aware of this and aware of our concern, and that he engage with, if at all possible, we're asking him to engage with the electorate and or the local councillor and to give feedback. Doesn't have to do it.
Can you capture that?
I certainly can, Mr. Chair. I just want to confirm you only want the one local MPP, because we do. I just want to be absolutely certain. Because,
I think we should send it to the local member of parliament. I don't think it's up to you guys. I mean, I think the local. No, there's only one. Do we want to do
Okay,
both?
so MPP Parsa.
He's the person who's the rep for that area.
All right. So do we have a seconder for that? I think I saw Councillor Chan's hand. Go ahead, Councillor Chan.
Thank you. Having attended.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, having attended the community meeting had been scheduled by the local councillor, and I believe also acting mayor at the time, DePaula, and the local councillor had a couple of meetings. I fully comprehend, understand the anger of the residents. And on that note, I'm in principle in support of Councillor Munch, that amendment yet to be seen, but the spirit and intent, if I understand correctly, is that we at the local level, because we're dealing with an issue that beyond our jurisdiction to make the changes, but we do want to bring the attention to those people at the level of government that actually does have the jurisdiction to do something.
Point of order.
Councillor Pirelli, point of order.
Sorry, did Councillor Munch move an amendment?
Yeah.
Oh, and who seconded it?
Councillor.
I'm second.
Can we see the amendment on the screen? Because I don't know what the amendment was.
We're working on it. Go ahead.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that's why I did say, what I said, waiting to see, but I'm going to second the intent of that. And one thing perhaps in the wording is yet to be finalized is in addition to the local member of provincial parliament, yes, is Michael Parsa. But I would suggest, subject to the mover of the amendment, is that to include Ontario Energy Board, which is the body that actually regulates utilities in this particular incident of the hydro utilities. But that's a consideration. But the intent and the spirit is to get to the level of jurisdiction which can do something about it, and I'm supporting it, and subject to looking at the final wording. Thank you.
Okay, so is that, Councillor Munch, would you mind putting that in as a friendly addition to your? Okay, well, in the spirit of trying to streamline this a bit. Okay, Councillor Munch, are you willing or not? Okay, you just add the Ontario Energy Board. Okay, thank you, Councillor. The next person on the list is Councillor Silovitz on the amendment. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to see the wording, but I think that this is prudent. I understand what our esteemed clerk is saying, but I do believe if we have, it's basically what I said when I first spoke. So if we have further direction to get the provincial government's attention, and if we have already sent them letters or information, I think it behooves them to respond to us, whether or not they are beholden to respond to us or not. It behooves them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the amendment? Okay, oh, sorry. Yeah, no, go ahead, Councillor Pirelli.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be very pleased to speak to this amendment when I know what it is. So okay, I'll just wait and see what it is, and then I'll speak to it.
Okay, well, I'll speak very quickly then on the amendment. I think that's fine. I certainly understand the residents' concerns about this. I mean, we've dealt with this on council numerous times now. Somewhere along the line, this kind of went off the rails, and it is an issue that I think warrants discussion. So I'm happy to support the amendment. I'll speak about the main motion when it comes back to that. So it's just the letter to the MVP, right? Okay. I have to hand it to you, Mr. Clerk. I mean, to take ideas like this and get them down on paper, sometimes it's not easy. So thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, subject to Councillor Munch's concurrence, I believe I've captured the intent of what his amendment is.
If the clerk would please read it so that Councillor Munch can confirm if that's exactly what he meant.
I'm happy to do so. Moved by Councillor Munch, seconded by Councillor Chan, that the main motion be amended to include the that should say the following additional clause. I'll fix that. B, that the city clerk be directed to send correspondence to member of provincial parliament Michael Parsa and the Ontario Energy Board expressing council's disappointment with the process for the approval of the power supply for site plan application D06-1901 Urbicon Properties Limited, and request MPP Parsa and the OEB to engage with the city residents and electric utilities on how to improve the process for installation of power supply that better takes into account the concerns of impacted residents.
Okay, so we have the amendment on the floor, and I see.
Because it didn't catch it all. Right? That's why Councillor Pirelli said.
That's fine.
and confirm
So
it.
makes this the
So-
suggestions.
After the residents, very well done. Thank you. So after residents say, I'd like to say with the support of the local councillor, or I think so. I'd like to see that some form of engagement with somebody from the city of Richmond Hill. If the party doesn't, that's fine. So I said, and request maybe PARSA and the OEB to engage with the city residents, maybe with the local councillor.
Would you be satisfied just only because we would normally council speaking as one voice theory? I'm happy to city members of council.
I'm happy with that. I'd like, but I want
The city, I'll say the city members of council, and is that okay, Councillor? Would that cover what your intention is?
I'll leave it with you guys. I'm just happy. I'm happy with the local council, but I'm happy to bring council too. Happy.
Okay. We'll capture that. Councillor Silovitz has asked for a recorded vote. I'm going to predict this will be unanimous, but just in case. Nope, not at all. It's a recorded vote. We'll see.
Just let me know when I can speak to the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Now would be
Right,
appropriate?
I forgot you were on the list.
That's all right. It's your list. I'm not sure what this amendment means. If it means that we want the Ontario Energy Board, and so my first question through you, Mr. Chairman, to staff, is the Ontario Energy Board the body that gives the rules and regulations to Electra that they must follow?
To staff, I'm not sure who wants to take that. Mr.
Our
DeMilta
solicitor,
seems to
maybe?
be turning his mic on. Go ahead, Mr. DeMilta. You're stuck with it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm no expert in the energy industry, but my understanding is that the Ontario Energy Board is an independent regulator, so they enforce the rules. They don't make the rules, or I don't remember the adjective or the verb that was used by regional and local council, but they enforce them to ensure that the industry is regulated fairly. They're an independent regulator. They don't make the rules. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. That was exactly my understanding. I just needed confirmation. I think what the member that moved this and the seconder thought this meant was that we wanted to change the rules regarding how Electra engages when there's an application that comes forward for them to provide power. What this motion states is that the Ontario Energy Board is to enforce the rules, as the solicitor said. And as far as I know, the rules were followed and enforced properly. So I don't understand what this motion is about. So I would ask, as a point of information to the mover and seconder, is it your intent or is it your belief that the Ontario Energy Board and Mr. Parsa did not ensure that the Ontario Energy Board was regulating properly, that Electra did something inappropriate in accordance with the rules that guide their behavior? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
So
I'll speak to it.
go ahead.
So the motion says and request MEP PARSA and the OEB. Yeah, so I'm willing to amend the and the OEB, maybe and perhaps including the OEB. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with
No. Can you?
Let me finish.
Sorry, my apology.
The intent of the motion is to inform, engage, and get feedback. If the parties choose not to, okay. But I don't see any harm in providing communication because as it is the regulatory body, and as that regulatory body is going through its processes and how it's going to be done, it can at any time in the future require the energy provider to engage in a certain form of conduct. So maybe this is an opportunity to give feedback to the OEB or information to the OEB they otherwise would not get. Now, as it relates to and to engage with the city, maybe that's a little bit much. I'm willing to amend that if the member wants that. So the spirit of this is
Okay.
really not.
Thank you, Councillor Munch. You didn't answer the question. My question through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Fairchild. Please stop the clock once I ask the question.
We're just waiting for Mr. Fairchild. Is he still online? Yeah. Thank you for waiting, Mr. Fairchild. We've got a question from Councillor Pirelli.
Mr. Fairchild, I hope you've been listening. It's been suggested that we're going to send a message to Mr. Parsa and the Ontario Energy Board and ask them to enforce the rules that exist. But what they really meant is they want to change the rules regarding your conduct. Who makes the rules that you are following?
The Ontario Energy Board has a distribution system code, and in that code outlines effectively the rules of engagement for all local distribution companies, specifically to stakeholder engagement, community engagement. I am not aware of specifics that would require us by a law, a rule, something in the code that states we, and prescribes how we are to engage with the local residents to the potential of, in project impacts. I will say, Electra has learned a lot from this process. We are, we did acknowledge and accept that we can do a better job with our project notification letters, timeliness to residents. And, I think there is an opportunity here for the communities we serve to have further engagement and understanding that while we do have an obligation to serve residents, commercial businesses, I think we need to work collectively with our municipalities in that how best to do that. So we're all informed that when future loads and customers come to our various areas, what's that mean in terms of how they would be serviced? And that's something Electra would be more than happy to engage with Richmond Hill staff and to brainstorm ideas. But specifically, there are no specific rules that speak to public engagement.
Sorry, please don't start the clock. I'm going to repeat the question. The question was, Mr. Fairchild, who makes the rules that you are following? Is it the Ontario Energy Board?
Okay, I thought I answered it. The Ontario Energy Board makes the rules insofar as the distribution system code is written. There are other rules that are followed in terms of building and constructing infrastructure that we follow as well. Does that help?
Okay. Oh, yeah, please. No, I didn't hear the part where the Ontario Energy Board makes the rules of. And now, my next question is, did Electra follow all the rules as currently outlined by the Ontario Energy Board?
Yes.
Perfect. In that case, thank you, Mr. Fairchild. In that case, I'm happy to support this motion. And the reason I'm happy to support it is because I think, and I'll speak more to it when we talk about the main motion, but the reason I'm happy to support this motion is because we need to lay blame where blame exists. And I don't believe it exists with Electra. They have been more than gracious in being flexible, open, understanding, transparent, and try to resolve an issue that was not created by them. They have a mandate and they do the best they can. They even so far as went to acknowledge that they can do better. And that's a real sign of leadership.
Thank you. One more speaker on the amendment, which is Councillor Liu. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, thank you all my colleagues, and thank you the mover of this amendment, Councillor Munch, and the seconder. While I was listening to Councillor Pirelli, I think he has a very, very good point, and I should have raised my hand a little bit earlier, because when I look at this amendment, I think the main spirit of it is in the last sentence. So I have a suggestion to the mover of the amendment. In the last sentence, I think the proper wording should be MPP Michael Parsa and the OEB to engage with the city members of council, residents, and electric utilities on how to reform the approval process for installation of power supply that better takes into account the concerns of impact residents. I think Councilor Pirelli is right. We know the system is there and we need to change the system so that this won't happen again. So this is my 2 cents to Councilor Munch. I think we need a reform in the approval process, because the city was never involved in the approval process, and they don't need any approval process in installing, poles on the street.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Liu. So,
Because like me, because I want to change the motion, right? So,
well, what I would suggest, I'm going to throw this out to council. We could change the wording. I mean, this is just a change of a couple of words. It doesn't substantially change the motion, the amendment in front of us. So if that's okay with council, it'll save some time if we do it that way.
I like the idea. I'd like to actually capitalize reform, not just put it as a lowercase.
I think I think let's just put it in proper
we
form,
want
and
to
then
emphasize the words. We know that words and how people can read words.
Right.
We want to make sure we emphasize words.
Okay,
It's my motion. So if I ask to do it, thank you so much. You can change the motion or vote against it, but it's my motion. That's what I'm choosing to do.
Mr. Clerk.
I don't care.
Okay, I think it needs to be done using standard practice. But I think we could put that change of words in there, unless anybody on council objects.
So for this one, actually, if you
I
ask,
object.
okay,
Look, improve is an adequate term. I don't know what reform even means. Can someone give me a definition of reform?
Okay, so I guess what we need to do then, if this is the case, Councillor Liu,
The clerk would like to respond.
Go ahead, Mr. Clerk. Okay, I think if we have an objection to this, Councillor Liu, I'd suggest that you put it in as an amendment.
It's fine with me. Yeah.
So your amendment is to add those couple of words.
Or if I'm allowed.
Okay, well, it's good. All right, that's fine. You're right. You're not. So let's wait until we get this passed, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so I don't see anybody else at this point on the amendment in front of us. So all those in favor of the amendment, opposed, recorded votes, Councillor Silovitz. A recorded vote was called. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Through the chair, voting on the amendment, Councillor Silovitz.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Munch.
you bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Barros.
Yes.
Thank you, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
Yes, please, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor West.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Chan.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Liu.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
Yes.
Thank you. That amendment does carry unanimously.
Okay, so back to the main motion. So, Councillor Liu, I'm going to come to you in a second, if that's okay. You're. Okay, so the next person on the list was, I believe it was Councillor Pirelli on the main motion.
Mr. Chairman, in light of the fact that Councillor Liu would like to move an amendment, there's no point in me speaking to the main motion if he's planning an amendment, so he should
Oh, I
go
just
first.
assumed that was the procedure, and I thought we were following the procedure, but that's fine. Councillor Liu, if you'd like to make that amendment.
That's fine. I'll
I
speak
think
to
that
the
would be
main
the most
motion.
efficient way to go. I agree with you. So go ahead, Councillor Liu.
I'll speak to the main motion then. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So first of all, the definition of reform is basically the same as
Actually,
improve.
that it would be best, sorry, Councillor Pirelli, but if you want to go with the definition, it's not on the table on the floor yet, so we should go to Councillor Liu first.
What's not on the table on the floor? What are you
The
talking about?
definition of reform, we don't have the word reform in the motion.
I'm
this time.
speaking to the main motion.
But the main motion, we don't have the amended main motion yet because Councillor
I'm
Liu
not
hasn't
speaking
made
to
it.
an amended main motion. I'm speaking to the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So reform, make changes, something typically
Point
a
of order?
social, in order to improve it.
Point of
In
order,
order
Councillor
To
DePaula.
improve it. An
Speaker's not
opportunity
speaking to
to
the
Excuse me,
reform
Councillor
and
Pirelli.
restructure
Councillor
an
DePaula.
antiquated schooling model.
Councillor DePaula.
The member's not speaking to the motion. He's talking about a word that's not in the motion.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Pirelli, would you like me to go to Councillor Liu first?
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, I'll speak specifically to the main motion. The reason we find ourselves here with this motion in front of us and the disappointment that I've heard has nothing to do with Electra. Let me be clear. Electra has done nothing wrong. And it is shameful, shameful that the local councillor, Councillor Liu, is suggesting that his failure to give support to his residents is because of something that Electra did. It's shameful. Electra did exactly what Electra had to do. As a matter of fact, Electra went out of its way, stopped production, which it did not have to do, for 10 months. During that time, Acting Mayor DePaula and Councillor Liu had an opportunity to bring resolutions to this council, to bring satisfactory solutions to the residents of Richmond Hill. And they failed. They failed to bring those recommendations to council. And now they simply want to blame Electra. And I'm speaking to the residents of Ward 3, the residents that are going to have to live with those polls, that are going to have to accept option 4. And it's not because of Electra. Electra is being used as a scapegoat here today. They are not the cause of this problem. They have been more than gracious. They have more than accommodating. They have agreed to option 4 at their cost, which they did not have to do. They agreed to stop construction for 10 months. Urbicon has to wait an extra 10 months because of this. And in that time, they failed the residents of Ward 3 to bring a proper solution. I spoke many times with the local councillor. I expressed to the local councillor, bring a solution. We'll pay for it. No.
Councillor Pirelli, listen.
Don't interrupt me.
No, excuse me. I have got a point of order.
I didn't hear a point of order.
I am asking you as the chair. I think there was.
Don't interrupt me. You can speak when it's your turn to speak.
I am asking
what is
you
your
as
point of
I
order?
am asking you as the
What
chair.
is your
I
point
think
of
you're
order?
very close to impugning members of council.
What is your point of order?
I think you are very close to
I
impugning.
don't care what you think. This is about the residents
Councillor
of Ward
Pirelli,
3.
I understand that. I think
stop.
The situation has been what it is.
Stop.
There has been lots of
Stop.
people working hard.
Stop
I would
and
ask
stop.
you to check your language, please. Thank you.
No, I'm not going to check my language. You didn't say anything to Councillor Liu when he impugned Electra, a corporation, and Mr. Fairchild and all of his people. You said nothing when he threw them under the bus. And it's not their fault. And now you want to stand here and judge me for giving my opinion? Shame on you. Shame on you for interrupting me. Electra has done nothing wrong. And it's shameful for this council to support that kind of conduct. I will not allow them to be the scapegoats in this. I expressed this to them when they reached out to me, and I told them that this was wrong how they were being treated. That's who you should be concerned about having been impugned by the local councillor. So let me get back to the facts. The facts are that in the last year, the local councillor and the then acting Mayor DePaula knew that there was a problem in the community, and they failed to bring a proper solution to council. All they did was kick the can down the road to this point so they could put up their hands and say, oh, Electra forced us to this point. No, Electra did not force them to this point. It was the failure of the local councillor and the deputy mayor to not find a proper solution and bring it to this council. And that, to me, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and more important, the residents of Ward 3, you need to know that they failed you. Members of council failed you. Your local councillor and the acting mayor had an obligation to respect you and keep fighting and bring solutions to council. And they never did. So that today, they can put their hands up and say, not our fault. Let's blame Electra. Well, residents of Ward 3 in Richmond Hill, it's not Electra's fault. That is my opinion. That's what the facts have outlined. The fault lies in this council, and specifically the two that were advocating for this area and were actually only pandering to this area. They were not. They were not.
Point of order.
So,
Point of order, Councillor. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that myself and one other councillor was impugned by the statements of the regional local councillor Pirelli.
yes, you were, because you didn't do your job.
Okay, excuse
If I
me.
could continue.
Councillor Pirelli.
Well, I'm just answering
Continue
the
to state
question.
my
Councillor
point of order.
Pirelli.
I don't know how we could have failed the residents in an area where the city of Richmond Hill has no jurisdiction whatsoever with the installation of hydro poles. So,
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pirelli, finish. I would ask you
Thank
again,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. Don't ask me again. Make your ruling. Was there a point of order?
Yes, there's
What
a
was
point
the
of
point
order.
of order?
I would ask you to not impugn members of council.
I didn't.
Yes, I think you did.
Oh, you
Go
think
ahead.
I did, but you're not sure. Okay, that's fair enough. When you're sure, you let me know. In the meantime, I stick by my statement. As the deputy mayor stated, it's not the responsibility and the authority of the municipality. Well, if that's the case, then why
of
this
order.
charade for the last 10 months?
Point.
Why
Point
the
of order,
charade for the
Councillor
last
Barros.
10 months?
Point of order, Councillor Barros.
Procedurally, if this is not something we have any influence over, as per the comments of Councilor Paula, what's it even doing here? How did this happen?
Okay, well, that's okay. That's not a point of order, I don't
That's my
think.
point of order. Procedurally, why is this here if it has nothing to do with
Because
us?
staff is asking and Electra is asking for direction to get this job done. That's why it's here.
But we do have authority. Just
No, Councillor, what we're doing is we're approving the solution because there was two solutions presented, option
Okay,
original or
Councillor
option
Pirelli, you can
4.
continue. You've got a little bit of time left.
Oh, thank you so much. So again, it was very fortuitous for the deputy mayor to say, we don't have any authority over this. So why then have they spent the last 10 months coming up, trying to pander to the community and say, we're going to fight for you, we're going to fight for you, but they never accomplished anything? Because I'm going to suggest to the residents of Ward 3, this was never about finding a solution. It was about posing to find solutions. Because if they wanted a solution, all they had to do is bring it forward, and I would have supported it. But the main communicator with the with the residents was Castro Liu and the then acting Mayor DePaula. But they never once came to us and said, I need your support to bury the lines on the other side of the street.
Okay, I think
Had they done that,
your time
then
is
they
up,
would have
Councillor
succeeded in
Pirelli.
their thing.
Councillor Barros.
Thank you. I think maybe we've beat some of this death, but I do have a question now that I've been thinking about all this. In the commentary from the commissioner, and this question will be through the mayor to the commissioner, it says that this is the equivalent of energizing 52,000 homes. The amount of power that's going into this business park. Now, is that uncommon? It sounds like this is extraordinary. And we've got all these policies, greening the hill, and we want to be this community of energy efficiency and all this kind of stuff. Is there something in the Planning Act that we can proactively do to protect future communities in Richmond Hill from an industrial site, bringing in this kind of hydro? Like, it may be too late for this group, but I'm wondering going forward, is there something?
Commissioner Khan, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not certainly far from the expert on the electrical distribution networks. And then I have technical staff on the panel that can answer some of that in a little more detail. However, I would suggest that development of this nature has been evolving over the years, and use patterns have evolved over the year, and different servicing requirements have evolved over the years. So whether it's electricity, sewers, pipes, water, roads, transportation, all of these things will evolve over time, and we can only plan for them to the best of our ability. But certainly the evolving and changing land use patterns and the nature of the end users, we don't have as much control over. I mean, for instance, if when new apartment buildings go up, for instance, and we have digital technology and everybody's smart cities, there's an increased demand for electricity. Or if we're going to sustainable cities where we have to have electrical hookups to every car, again, there's an additional demand on the power grid. So to foresee all of these things is challenging, but we certainly do our best. But I certainly cannot predict what the service providers' ultimate plans may be, but we try to engage them as much as possible.
And that's a great comment, because we see that in neighborhoods. We see the increased demand for mobile services, cell services. And then when the providers come with the solutions, we get upset that we may have a cell tower near our neighborhood. So I guess in the end, I just feel horrible for these residents. I just know that more could have been done had Councillor Liu actually brought it to the table and said, hey, guys, do you want to spend this money out of whatever reserve fund or whatever? We would have at least had that conversation. Do we want to do this? And maybe set this up for future industrial parks to protect the integrity of communities. And I didn't even get the opportunity to discuss that or have that conversation. So I really feel badly for the residents of Ward 3.
Okay, thank you. So we have an amended motion on the floor. Councillor DePaulo.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so all of these options are on the table right now. Anyone can move an amendment that we, instead of option 4, we go for option 5. The point is that $6 to $7 million, and we'd have to ask the residents of Richmond Hill to spend millions of dollars to fix an aesthetic problem, unless they.
Point of order.
Point of order, Councillor Pirelli.
Option 5 is not on the agenda. It's not part of this motion.
That's not a point of order.
Remind the member to speak to the motion.
It's not a point of order.
Remind the member to speak to the motion.
He is talking about the motion.
No, he's not. He's talking about option 5.
He's talking about his commentary is to get.
Where's the word option 5 in this?
It is not procedurally
Well,
incorrect. Go
reform
ahead,
wasn't
Councillor
in mine,
DePaulo.
and you ruled that I couldn't speak to the word reform, but you're okay to speak to option 5 that's not here.
Go ahead, Councillor DePaulo.
So the motion is that council approve option 4, and other options could be discussed. If other council members feel strongly, they could propose that we proceed with another option. So this option 4 is vastly less costly than any other option. And that's why at the time as acting mayor, I tried to soften the impact a little bit. I know the residents aren't completely satisfied, but we have shorter poles and a much less numbers of poles. And at that time, we asked, retiring treasurer Dave Dexter, he found $260,000 in reserves to make that happen. And now we're here today where Electra has said, we're gonna bear that cost. We're gonna cover that cost. We just want to go ahead, and that has to be acknowledged, I think, because there's no cost to the taxpayer whatsoever. I can't say enough about the yeoman efforts that I believe Councillor Liu has fought as hard as he possibly could. He's gone outside of this jurisdiction to get this motion on the floor today. Option 4 is helpful, but not the ultimate desire of the residents in the area. But we've come a long way.
Point of information.
Councillor Prelli.
The speaker has just suggested that Councillor Liu went through painstaking work to get this motion on the floor. I believe it's moved by Councillor Silovitz. Did I misunderstand?
That's not a point of information.
It's not?
No, it's not. Go.
It's not.
Go ahead, Councillor DePaulo.
Through many meetings with his residents, he has fought hard to get the right thing done. And what we've discovered is a flaw in the system. And this motion covers off well with the amended request that, we hope no other community ever has to go through this. We hope there is reform and that there is an improvement to the process that Electra has to undergo. As Mr. Fairchild said, there is no requirements for them to engage in the residents at all whatsoever. They were erecting these poles. They were well into construction when Councillor Liu stepped in and said, "Hold on, we want to see if there's any other possible way that this can be done." And they have effectively been on hold, and now they're bearing the cost of a slightly adjusted construction project that is less impactful. But what we've discovered through this process is that the system does not allow for a consultation with the public and for residents' concerns to be heard and addressed. And there's no requirement on Electra or any other local utility company to accommodate the needs and concerns both of the residents and of the council in the jurisdiction that they're proceeding forward in. So we are where we're at today. I fully support this motion. I applaud Councillor Liu's efforts and all those involved. Electra and our staff. Our staff has inserted themselves into a construction project that we had nothing to do with, and we've implemented a helpful way that creates lower poles and less poles. So that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So I think we need a recess. And I hate to do that right at this moment because we're right in the middle of this issue, but I'm concerned that we may not be able to get through this quickly. So I'm just looking around here. I would suggest that perhaps we could call a recess.
Call the question.
I would suggest that we called a recess for a few minutes, or we can call the question, which is
I'll second the motion to call the question.
Okay, let's call the question. All right, so we're going to be, Councillor Liu. Well, you've actually spoken No, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Yu.
We have a motion to call the question that's been seconded.
All right, sorry, my
Call the vote.
apologies. I do have Councillor Silovitz and Councillor Liu on the list of speakers, and I feel at this point it would be unfair to them to not allow them to speak, given the discussion that we've had.
Everybody spoke to the motion.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to, I think before we do this, I think we need to have a recess.
You have a
Is
motion
everybody-
to call
is-
the question. You have a motion to call the
Excuse me.
question. Seconded by Councillor Barrows.
Mr.
Call the
Hike,
question.
call the question takes precedence.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I might, you do have a motion that it's called closed debate in our procedure
Okay.
bylaws is the same thing. It can only be voted on if all members who wanted to speak on the item have spoken at least once. It cannot be amended or debated, but it does require a 2/3 vote to pass.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've actually not spoken on this,
Yes, you have.
not in this round.
No, it doesn't matter in this round. You have spoken.
I've spoken on the amendment.
You've
Does that
spoken to
qualify?
everything.
Okay. All right. Okay, so vote to call the question then.
Thank you. The motion to close debate on this item, it does require 2/3 vote, which is 6 members voting in the affirmative. I see Councillor Silovitz has requested the recorded vote, so I will take that as the request. Councillor Silovitz?
I just want to make 100% sure here what we're voting on. This is to get the 2/3 majority.
If this
To call the
passes,
question?
if this passes on 2/3, then we would immediately move to the vote on the main motion as amended. So voting on the motion to close debate, Councillor
No.
Silovitz?
No.
Thank you. Mayor West?
No.
Thank you. Councillor Chan? Councillor Chan, please. Councillor Councillor DePaula, can you turn
no.
off your mic? We
no.
can only have a, thank you.
No.
No, thank you, Councillor Chan. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Barrows.
Yes.
Thank you, Regional Local Councillor Pirelli.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Munch.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Liu.
No.
Thank you. That motion to close debate fails to carry.
Motion to adjourn for 10 minutes. Motion to recess for 10 minutes.
That's how we can have a recess. Why don't we say we'll be back here at 5:15? That work for everybody? All right. Thank you.